Chapter 32. A month later, as expected, Fang Zhichen passed the exam. However, he was not the top scorer but the third. The top scorer was from Lingnan. His surname was Shun and his name was Yuanqi. In terms of appearance, he was even more handsome than the third. When he was paraded through the streets, he was almost drowned by the flowers thrown at him by passers-by. However, what was even more impressive was his talent. The emperor gasped in admiration at his incisive words, his original arguments, and his insightful policy treatise. He claimed that this was the most outstanding dossier he had ever read since he ascended the throne. Thereupon he invited several great scholars of the present age to take turns at the Qianglin banquet to sound him out. The top scorer was neither servile nor overbearing, neither in a hurry. He refuted the scholars until they were speechless and ashamed of their inferiority. Not only was he talented, but he was also good at conducting himself. With just a few words, he smoothed things over, making the emperor very happy and praising him endlessly. The second and third place finishers were also outstanding talents of the present age, but in comparison to him, they seemed to be overshadowed. After the banquet, the emperor kept the top scorer for a long talk through the night. The next day, he transferred him to the Hanlin Academy as an attendant scholar. Unexpectedly, he was promoted to a fifth-rank official in the capital. It was obvious that he was favored by the emperor. Not to mention how various forces were trying to win over the top scorer, the annual ceremony was going to be held at the Baiyun Taoist Temple. This was a big event in the capital. Whether it was high officials, nobles, or commoners, they would all go to the Taoist temple to hold a sacrificial ceremony to pray for a bumper harvest and favorable weather in the new year. Although the emperor and empress could not come in person, they would send servants to deliver offerings to the temple. The 10-day celebration would attract everyone in the capital. Marquis Yongla, West Wing Courtyard. Alu, standing on a golden frame, saw the handsome young man striding over. She flapped her wings and shouted, "Master Ho is here! Master Ho is here!" While walking, Yu Pinyin flicked a peanut into its mouth. Only then did it stop its loud and rough voice, which sounded like a broken bellows. Tao Hong and Lu Lu had just finished changing their master's clothes, and were kneeling to tidy up her skirt. The young girl was wearing a fiery red silk dress that trailed along the ground, and a light transparent mermaid overshirt draped over her shoulders. The rich colors of her dress were not covered by the overshirt, and instead added to her mysteriousness. She dismissed the two maidservants and picked up a fine brush to draw her eyebrows. When she heard Alu's noisy voice, she turned her eyes and looked over. She lazily said, "Older brother, wait for me. I'm still early." Every time his younger sister went out, she would spend at least an hour dressing up. Yu Pinyin had long been accustomed to this. He sat by her side and drank tea, his dark eyes never leaving her fair and delicate face. Yu Xiang dipped some charcoal powder and carefully smeared it along the direction of her eyebrows. After deliberately thickening and darkening it, she gently drew it up at the end of her eyebrows. Her face, which was already beautiful and dazzling, immediately looked extremely fierce. She looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror and changed a few places. Then she raised her eyebrows and smiled proudly at her brother. "See, this is called the unibrow blade style. Does it feel very fierce? This is exactly the effect I want." She then dyed the ends of her eyes with a weasel brush and hooked it. Her round and big cat eyes became even brighter. Then she squinted slightly and looked at her brother. "Look at me. Do you feel that your heart is trembling and panicking? You don't even dare to come forward and talk to me? Those talkative girls always laugh at me behind my back. I want to crush them in terms of appearance. I want to make them feel ashamed and take a detour." Hearing this, Yu Pinyin's chaotic heartbeat gradually calmed down. He felt both funny and sympathetic. He tapped the tip of her nose and said, "That's right. Just your face alone can make them die of beauty. Not only do they die of beauty, but I'm also almost dead of beauty when I look at myself in the mirror." Yu Xiang turned her face in front of the mirror. Yu Pinyin put down his teacup. He laughed and pinched her cheeks. He joked, "Let me see how thick my little Xiang'er's skin is. I'm afraid that even a crossbow arrow might not be able to pierce through it." Yu Xiang shook her head left and right to avoid him. The brother and sister pair instantly became a mess. After a quarter of an hour, Yu Xiang laughed and fell into her brother's arms. She said angrily, "Stop fooling around. We won't be able to make it in time for the ritual. I haven't put on lipstick yet." Yu Pinyin let go of her soft cheeks and smeared some lipstick on her face. After that, he pinched her chin and admired it for a long time. Then he put her down and carried her into the wheelchair. Yu Xiang saw that he didn't push her out of the door. Instead, he turned around and went to the cubicle. She called out warily, "What are you doing? The old ancestor must be waiting anxiously." Yu Pinyin smiled but didn't say anything. He held a wet handkerchief in his hand and wiped off the makeup that she had painstakingly applied for more than an hour. He smiled and said, "It's fine if you're so beautiful that you die of it. Don't harm others." There were too many people at the ritual. He didn't want his precious little sister to be seen by other men. "At least put a flower ornament on my forehead." Yu Xiang made a last-ditch effort. Yu Pinyin rummaged through her makeup box and found the simplest flower ornament that looked like a cinnabar mole. He stuck it between her eyebrows and urged, "It's done. Let's go." "How about the lotus-shaped one? It's not that eye-catching." Yu Xiang tugged on his sleeve. Yu Pinyin didn't answer. He bent down and peeled off the cinnabar mole between her eyebrows. She hurriedly hid her face in his arms and shouted, "It's done, it's done. It's done. Brother, let's go quickly." Yu Pinyin hugged her shoulders and chuckled. Although the old lady believed in Buddhism, an annual event like the tea gathering was a good opportunity to visit her old friends. Naturally, she couldn't miss it. At this time, she had already dressed up and was sitting in the hall drinking tea. When she saw her granddaughter, who was wearing no makeup and looking listless, she smiled and said, "Oh, did your brother wash off your makeup again? Isn't that so? It's always like this at a larger gathering. How can I face others?" Yu Xiang sighed. The matriarch laughed even harder. She pinched the tip of her nose and said, "If you don't have the face to see others, how will all the noble maidens in the capital deal with themselves? You have to leave a way out for others." She wasn't boasting, but her granddaughter's appearance was one of the best in the entire Great Han dynasty. If she hadn't tragically lost her legs, the Iceman who came to propose marriage would have trampled down the Marquis household steps. Yu Pinyin warmly agreed. "Old ancestor is right. That's why I always tell her not to harm others. It's enough for her to harm only me." These words sounded a little strange, but the matriarch didn't think much of it. Mama Ma came in with a red envelope and reported, "The old lady, this is the marriage proposal from the Fong clan. Do you want to take a look?" The matriarch waved her hand carelessly. "What's there to look at? Anyway, it's going to be rejected. Have you made arrangements with the monastery head?" After Fong Zhichen came in third place in the high school, the Pei clan arranged a meeting with Yu. Both sides were very satisfied, and not long after, the Iceman came to propose marriage. Because the matriarch and the Pei clan's mother were old friends for decades, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were as close as sisters. Even if she wanted to refuse, she couldn't make it too obvious. Therefore, she asked her to send the marriage proposal first. When the time came, she would just say that the two of them didn't match. "We've already discussed it. These two characters definitely won't match. It's a pity that such a good marriage would be ruined." Mama Ma sighed as she put the marriage proposal into her sleeve. The two of them weren't playing a game of riddles. After a little thought, one would know what they were talking about. Yu, who arrived late because of her meticulous makeup, happened to hear the whole story. The joy on her face disappeared. Wan Qiu held the curtain open for her for a while, but she didn't move. He reminded her, "Eldest miss, the old lady is only waiting for you." Yu seemed to wake up from a dream. Her footsteps were weak as she walked in. Old Madame Foreign saw her expression as if she had lost her parents and naturally knew that she had hurt her. But she did not explain the reason, nor did she open her mouth to comfort her. As long as she had a bit of brain, she would know that the Fong family was definitely not a rich village, but a cemetery of peace and happiness, where people died without knowing why. "Since everyone is here, let's go." She waved her hand lightly. Yu nodded and lowered her head slightly to hide her resentful expression. The Baiyun Taoist temple was indeed crowded. Fortunately, the temple master had already prepared the most comfortable accommodations for the officials and nobles. Yu Pinyin was in charge of the temple's defense. After sending her grandmother and sister to the side room, she hurriedly left. The three of them rested for a while, took the offerings, and went straight to the Leizu temple. Outside the temple stood 2 rows of dragon scale guards with swords and halberds. The formation was strict. Someone who could make the dragon scale guards personally protect must have an extraordinary identity. There was an 80 to 90% chance that he or she was a member of the imperial family. The matriarch stood in place and hesitated for a moment before turning to leave. An old mama came out with 2 sticks of incense and inserted them into the large bronze cauldrons on both sides of the temple door. Seeing the 3 of them, she hurriedly greeted them. The matriarch looked back and saw that it was the crown princess wet nurse Song Shi. She immediately showed a surprised expression. So it's Song Shi. The noble person inside is actually the crown princess? Isn't her highness? Song Mama gave her a look and mouthed silently. I just want peace of mind. The matriarch nodded in agreement. The crown princess had been married to the crown prince for more than 6 years, but she had never given birth. This year she finally became pregnant, but she was pregnant with twins. If she gave birth to 2 boys, one would have to go. It was fine if one didn't go, but both would be stripped of their inheritance rights. If she gave birth to 2 girls, the birth of twins would be difficult and dangerous. Who knew if it would damage their bones and make it difficult to conceive in the future? The best-case scenario was a boy and a girl, a dragon and a phoenix. But twins were difficult to raise. It was fine if both children were safe, but if the dragon died and the phoenix was born, then the emperor and the crown prince's faces would be good. Reality was worse than speculation. The crown prince's concubine had already given birth to the crown prince's eldest concubine, and that concubine was the empress dowager's grandniece. Her family background could only be higher than the crown princess. If the crown prince consort could not keep a healthy baby boy in this pregnancy, her future could be said to be uncertain and extremely dangerous. No wonder she insisted on coming to the Taoist temple to pray after being pregnant for 7 months. She was eager to have a child. The matriarch gestured at her belly and asked, "Is it all right?" Song Shi nodded. The imperial physician said that the fetus is very stable. It's fine to come out and pray. Just as the 2 were talking, the crown princess heard the noise and walked out. When she saw Yu Xiang, she was very happy and waved, "Xiang'er, come here quickly." Lulu of Taohong hurriedly pushed Yu Xiang forward to greet. Yu Xiu, who was ignored, felt resentful and humiliated. She could only stand stiffly in place and bow. The crown princess grasped Yu Xiang's white wrist and smiled at the matriarch. "Old Yu matriarch, your granddaughter is famous for being intelligent. Can she borrow Ben Gong's good fortune?" "Yang Yang is too kind. In terms of good fortune, how can she compare to you?" The matriarch hurriedly waved her hand. The crown princess smiled but didn't say anything. She pulled Yu Xiang into the hall and pointed at a bamboo tube. "Ben Gong has been standing here for half an hour, but Ben Gong doesn't dare to reach out to draw. Xiang'er, help Ben Gong draw one. Whether it's good or bad, Ben Gong won't blame you." When Yu Xiang heard this, her scalp went numb. Even if she said she wouldn't blame her, who would be able to maintain a calm attitude if she really drew the worst lot? She would more or less mind. However, the crown princess was the monarch and she was the subject. This was an era where if the monarch wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. Yu Xiang had no choice. She closed her eyes and prayed for a moment. Then she decisively drew one and handed it to the crown princess, who was full of hope. The matriarch didn't show it on her face, but her heart was in her throat. She was afraid that her granddaughter would draw the worst lot and cause the crown princess to hold a grudge. The author has something to say. "Thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Wax. What I'm talking about is starting next week. My second wife passed away this week, so the family has been rather busy. I'm really sorry. Love Qingyu through a landmine report time, Fengua through a landmine report time, and Isi through a grenade report time, S through a landmine report time, Huayazi through a grenade report time, Air Baowai -0 through a grenade report time, Bufeng 1 through a landmine report time, Throw a landmine report time, Ye through a landmine report time, Lian Kai Bingti through a landmine report time, She through a landmine report time, Buggy in the book through a landmine report time, Leslie through a landmine report time, She through a Landmine report time love Qingyu through a grenade report time Luoshiba, through a landmine report time new old dream through a landmine report time Luoshiba, through a landmine report time, I'm a rice bug. Chapter 33. The Crown Princess had been having a hard time recently. If she had married into an ordinary family, it would have been a great thing to have twins. But she had married into the royal family, so the situation was the complete opposite. Giving birth to 2 sons was considered bad luck. Giving birth to 2 daughters was considered bad luck. Giving birth to 1 son and 1 daughter was a great auspicious sign, but there were hidden dangers. The birth of a dragon and the death of a phoenix were considered bad luck. The birth of a dragon and the death of a phoenix were considered bad luck. Only when the twins were safe could it be considered stable. After thinking about it, it was better to have only 1 child. It was a 50-50 chance, so there was no need to worry so much. What made her even more anxious was that the crown prince only had 1 son in the 6 years she had married into the Eastern Palace. Compared to the other princes who had many children, it was really pitiful. The emperor valued the concubine very much. The crown prince's lack of a legitimate son had always been his sore point, so he was more and more dissatisfied with the crown princess these years. In addition, vice-concubine Sue's ambition grew. During her pregnancy, she frequently spread rumors to disturb her mind. Several sisters-in-law also secretly tried to trip her up and make her abort the baby. It was difficult to describe the dangers. Although the crown princess acted calmly, she could not stand it anymore. That was why she went to the Taoist temple to pray. After delivering the offerings, she stood in front of the lot pot for half an hour, not daring to reach out for it. She could only call Yuxiang in. It was fine if she drew the good lot, but if she drew the bad lot, she could comfort herself that it was someone else who drew it and had nothing to do with her. After taking the lot, her fingertips trembled slightly. She handed it to the Taoist temple without looking at it. The Taoist temple made a sound of surprise. She straightened her back and asked, "Is the lot bad?" The old lady held the Buddha beads and silently chanted, Ba. Suddenly, she remembered that this was a Taoist temple. She quickly apologized and changed it to Immeasurable God. Yu Xiu's eyes flashed. She was just waiting to see Yu Xiang's bad luck. She was still willing to get involved in this kind of situation where she could not get anything good out of it. It was obvious that her intelligence and ability were all flattered by her ancestor and brother. The Taoist temple looked at it carefully for a moment, then smiled and waved his hand. No, I have to congratulate the crown princess. You have drawn the only lot of the dragon and phoenix lot. Crown princess, please take a look. Then he presented the lot with both hands. The crown princess took a closer look and saw that the signature was marked with a dragon and a phoenix connected from top to bottom. There were only 2 lines on the signature. The bamboo transformed into a dragon and a phoenix that entered the sky. The light of the Tao scattered all evil. The meaning behind this was obvious. Yuxiang waved her hand. It's not that I'm blessed. It's that the deities are borrowing my hand to bless you. In the end, it's all thanks to your good fortune. Zhou is also here. She is sleeping in the wing room at the back of the hall. Take her out for a walk so that she won't sleep for the whole day. The crown princess smiled. Yuxiang nodded, then walked to the back hall under the guidance of 2 palace servants. The old madam heaved a sigh of relief. Xiang was indeed a lucky star. Her luck was truly extraordinary. After chatting with the crown princess for a while and paying respects to the lightning ancestor in the hall, she finally left with Yu Xiu, who was full of worries. Although the scale of the White Cloud Taoist temple could not be compared to the Jinghua temple, it still occupied an entire mountain. There was a naturally formed lake at the top of the mountain. The green lake reflected the light blue sky and the bright sun. The scenery was truly beautiful. The lakeside was the most quiet and secluded place. Therefore, the Taoist temple specially built a 2-story high tea room. Next to the tea room were several small pavilions. Whether it was drinking tea or boating, it was the best place to go. When the scenery was good, more people went. When Yuxiang brought the 9th princess and Fan Jiaojiao to the tea room, the seats by the window on the 2nd floor were already full. Only a small table at the stairs was empty. The 9th princess was 12 years old and would soon be 13. She had grown taller and her face had also matured. Although she was not as beautiful as Yuxiang, she was still pretty and cute. In addition, she had an outstanding noble aura. As long as she did not say anything stupid, she would be able to intimidate people. Fan Jiaojiao was the youngest of the three, but she was also the strongest. She had thick eyebrows and big eyes and a snake-tail whip at her waist. If anyone dared to be disrespectful to the ninth princess, she would whip them without another word. The noble ladies in the capital gave her the nickname Thug Show. When she heard it, she was not ashamed but proud. Because there were many people in the Taoist temple, the Taoist temple gave the tea room to the female guests to prevent them from offending the noble guests. The small pavilions by the lake were used to entertain the male guests. The Taoist child wiped the table with a rag and invited the three to sit. The ninth princess pointed to the window and said, "I want to sit there." Fan Jiaojiao immediately walked over, pulled out the whip at her waist and flicked it on the table. She snorted, "Did you hear that? The ninth princess wants to sit. Hurry up and move." Under Yuxiang's unremitting teaching, she was developing in the direction of a fierce daughter from a general's family. No matter how one looked at her, she was valiant. The four noble ladies stood up with humiliated expressions and moved to the stairs. The rest of the people stood up and bowed. The ninth princess looked straight ahead and walked over. She picked up the pastries that the four of them had never eaten before and began to bite into them. The crumbs at the corner of her mouth immediately dispelled her noble aura and turned it into a foolish aura. Yuxiang glanced at her and faintly sighed at the beautiful spring scenery outside the window. "What's wrong? Eat." The ninth princess picked up a piece of cloud cake and eagerly handed it over. "Eat by yourself. Slow down, don't choke. Didn't you eat when you left the palace?" "I did. My appetite has been increasing recently. Imperial sister-in-law and imperial mother don't allow me to eat too much. They say I'll become as fat as when I was young, and won't be able to get married next year." The ninth princess's cheeks kept moving like a hamster. "They're just scaring you. When you were young you weren't fat, you were round. You looked good." Fan Jiaojiao's flattery skills had improved over the years. She didn't do it on purpose. It was just that she had a straightforward personality and liked the ninth princess very much, so her words were naturally a bit mushy. Yuxiang nodded in agreement. As they chatted, there was a sudden commotion in the tea room. One of the noble ladies screamed, "Ah, it's the Zhuangyan. He's also here." Everyone looked in the direction she was pointing. They saw that in a small pavilion 3 or 4 meters downstairs, several young scholars were sitting around drinking wine and chatting. When they reached a good part of the story, they couldn't help but pick up their chopsticks and tap the sides of their bowls, singing loudly. The smoky green willow branches hung down in all directions. They rose and fell in the breeze, as if they were dancing to the song. It was quite elegant. However, even more elegant and enchanting was the Zhuangyuan's unusually handsome facial features. He was smiling lightly, frowning, or expressionless. All kinds of expressions made people feel intoxicated. The ninth princess forgot to swallow the pastry in her mouth. She murmured, "So handsome as the lotus seed cake." As she said this, she stood up and leaned out to look. With her taking the lead, the other noble ladies also forgot to be reserved. They all squeezed to the window to look, occasionally exclaiming in surprise. Yuxiang glanced over and was slightly surprised. The legendary Zhuangyan was actually that downtrodden young master who had attempted to commit suicide by crashing into a carriage. In just 2 short months he really had made a meteoric rise. After a few glances, her attention was attracted by the tall figure with his back to the tea room. If the scholars were compared to green bamboos, that figure was like a pine tree. Moreover, it was the cloud-soaring pine tree that had taken root at the top of a cliff. It had a persevering and heroic bearing. He didn't need to show his face. In Yuxiang's eyes, he was the most special existence. The laughter of the noble ladies attracted the attention of the youths by the lake. Although they didn't show it on their faces, they were slightly proud. The volume of their recitations unconsciously increased. Only that person turned a deaf ear to it and turned a blind eye to it. He only placed his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist. His back was straight, and one could vaguely see the strong and tense muscles hidden under the official's robe. Yuxiang stared at him for a long time. Seeing that he didn't notice her, her eyes turned. She took out a few red beans from her pouch and threw them at him. Then she immediately bent down and hid under the windowsill. There was the sound of something breaking through the air. Yupinyan quickly dodged. He looked down and saw that it was a few red beans. He turned to look at the tea room and found that the 9th princess was holding half a pastry in her mouth and staring foolishly at Shen Yuanqi. Fan Jiaojiao waved her hand at him and winked at him. He didn't know what she was trying to say. Yupinyan raised his eyebrows and pretended not to care. He turned around and continued to stare at the disguised crown prince in the pavilion. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and snickered. Then she took out a few more red beans and threw them at him. However, she found that her brother quickly turned around and glanced at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. He silently reprimanded her. Naughty again. Yu Xiang leaned against the windowsill and sent him a proud look. She already looked like a painting, and her head was shrouded in the splendid light of spring. The cinnabar between her eyebrows shone brightly, tender and alluring, causing everyone by the lake to raise their heads to look at her. Their eyes filled with infatuation. Especially Shen Yuanqi and Fang Zhichen. Their eyes almost couldn't move. The joy on Yupinyan's face instantly disappeared. He picked up a red bean from the ground and threw it at the window where she was. There was a crisp sound. The bamboo poles supporting the window frame broke, and the window fell down heavily. Fortunately, Yu Xiang understood her brother's temperament. When he bent down to pick up the red bean, she hurriedly dodged. She also pulled the 9th princess away from the window. Otherwise, their noses would have been knocked out. Your brother is angry again. Every time I see him, he's angry. The 9th princess shook her head and sighed. Yandere is really amazing. My father said that he was the #1 expert of the great Han dynasty. These words were true. You're an expert after all, so you're bound to have a little temper. Fan Jiaojiao began to flatter again. Yu Xiang ignored the two and immediately went to open the window. However, he found that there was no one by the lakeside. There was only a group of dragon scale guards holding swords and halberds hurriedly walking past. Shen Yuanqi took his leave from the crown prince and walked in front of Yupinyan. He cupped his hands and said, "This official greets Master Ho. Is that young lady just now Master Ho's younger sister?" Fang Zhichen was also planning to leave. When he heard this, he couldn't help but look at the two people. The young lady's face, brighter and more beautiful than spring, kept appearing in his mind. For a moment he was a little dazed. He had never imagined that the lame miss of the first wife was actually such a stunning beauty. Her face alone was enough to make up for all the flaws in her body. Lord Shun, you've overstepped your bounds. Yupinyan's tone was cold. His right hand rested on the embroidered spring saber at his waist and gently stroked the hilt. Shen Yuanqi realized that he had been impulsive. He hurriedly bowed and apologized. Yupinyan nodded expressionlessly and strode away. Shen Yuanqi touched his slightly cold neck. He felt both gratified and disappointed. His only family member was close at hand, but he couldn't recognize her. She was now the daughter of the first wife of the Marquis household. She was deeply doted on by her elder brother and grandmother. She enjoyed endless glory, splendor, wealth, and luxury. If he rashly came to recognize her, he didn't know whether or not she would resent him. Forget it, let's wait and see. Shen Miaoqi had recently entered the capital. He estimated that it wouldn't be long before she found the Marquis Yongla. It was extremely difficult for the Marquis household to find a merchant with the surname Shan. On the other hand, it was very easy for the family Shan to find the Marquis household. There were only a few Marquis households in the capital. In addition, there was the clue of the disaster 10 years ago. He just needed to ask around a little to find out. Based on Shen Miaoqi's temperament, she would definitely take back everything that belonged to her. He would wait for her to make the first move before making other arrangements. The author has something to say. Thank you to my cute little creatures. Also thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 34. As soon as Fang Zhichen returned to the small courtyard where he lived, he hurriedly sent someone to find the Pei clan. The Pei clan came in dejectedly and said, "Son, I'm afraid your marriage with Miss Yu is not going to happen." Fang Zhichen's face was filled with anxiety, but when he heard this, he immediately laughed and asked, Did something happen? Your birth characters are not compatible. They said that it was a forced marriage, and there will be disasters in the future. If it is serious, it will harm your children. Therefore, this marriage is not going to happen. The family you has returned the marriage invitation. Mother, why don't you send my marriage invitation back to them? What's there to do? The one who showed you your birth characters is the master of the Baiyun monastery, who is known as a living immortal. He can't be wrong. The Pei clan waved their hands. Your son wants you to marry the eldest daughter of the family you with the marriage invitation. Fang Zhichen's ears were so red that they were dripping blood. He stammered, your son saw her by the lake just now. I really like her. Mother, please give me your blessings. The Pei clan was happy at first, but then they hesitated. Son, it's good that you are willing to marry the eldest daughter of the family but she can't do anything. Who will take care of your backyard? Who will give birth to your children? Who will take care of you? These are all big problems. You can't make decisions on impulse. No matter how beautiful she is, she can't live with it, can she? Fang Zhichen was in a difficult position, but he couldn't forget Yu Xiang's charming face. After thinking for a while, he said, Mother, let's welcome cousin Yu into the family first. Let her help me take care of my backyard and give birth to my children. Miss Yu can be my wife with peace of mind. If it weren't for the imperial court's salt tax inspection, the Pei clan would have ordered their son to marry their niece instead of trying to use his marriage as a bargaining chip. Hearing this, Fang Zhichen was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, that's good. Let's do that. I'll write a letter to eldest sister and ask her to prepare as soon as possible. Her brother-in-law from the Pei clan had passed away early, leaving her sister and a daughter of the first wife to lead a difficult life. The Pei clan had a deep relationship with her, so they helped her to buy a house nearby to take care of her. Their niece was also brought back to the family from a young age and raised as their own daughter. Although the two sisters didn't say it explicitly, they both had the intention of getting married. Although she had entered the family as a concubine, Yu Xiang was just a decoration. If she explained it clearly to her sister, she would definitely agree. Fang Zhichen thought for a moment and said hesitantly, don't. Let's wait until Miss Yu is married before marrying my cousin. Otherwise, family Yu will be unhappy. The members of the Pei clan were unhappy. They sneered. What right does family Yu have to be unhappy? It is the good fortune of his family that we are willing to take the cripple. You are His Majesty's hand-picked Tanhua. Not only are you brimming with talent and handsome appearance, but you also have a boundless future. Which family's daughter can't you marry? If I am willing to let my good son marry their cripple, their family should be secretly happy. The members of the Pei clan patted their son's shoulder and continued, Son, don't look at her family's high status. With Yu Xiang's qualifications, I'm afraid that no one will want her in this lifetime. Marrying her is only a temporary measure. In the future, when your father gets out of his predicament and you have a meteoric rise, we can't let a cripple take over the position of the family's matriarch. Because of your situation, I can also submit a letter to the clan elders to fight for the position of a second wife for Qian'er. Once we get her, she will be at our mercy. Fang Zhichen felt that his confidence was lacking. He waved his hand and said, No. If Marquis Yongla finds out, he will come knocking on our door. If he wants to ruin Yu Xiang's reputation and make no one dare to marry her in this lifetime, he can just come knocking on our door. Do you think our family will be afraid of him? Don't worry, I've already asked around. He dotes on Yu Xiang very much and protects her like she's his treasure. Once Yu Xiang is in our hands, it means that we have grasped his weakness. Even if he wants to get rid of the rats, he will have to consider the jade bottle, right? When the time comes, whether you want to be stationed in the capital or be promoted or transferred, you can go to him. For the sake of Yu Xiang, there is no reason for him to refuse. The Pei clan's wishful thinking crackled loudly. Fang Zhichen thought about it carefully and felt that it was right. A married daughter was like spilled water. If they wanted their daughter to have a good life, shouldn't they treat their son-in-law well? Although Yu Xiang's family was prominent and it wouldn't be difficult for her to divorce, her situation was very different from others. She was a cripple. If she really left the Fang clan, her life would be over and she would only end up alone. With how much Yu Pinyin doted on her, he wouldn't be willing to part with her no matter what. The The more the mother and son thought about it, the more they felt that this matter was feasible. They immediately went to find the old madam to exchange marriage notes. Suddenly, they felt that if they were too impatient, it wouldn't look good on them. They could only endure for the time being. On the other hand, Yu Siu also heard that her great marriage had fallen through. She hated the old madam to the bone. She hid in her room and pondered for half a day before finally coming up with a solution. Yu Xiang didn't know that the mother and son of the Pei clan were already thinking about her. After drinking tea and sending off the 9th princess and Fan Jiaojiao, she let the maidservant push her back leisurely. Seeing that the small courtyard where she lived was almost within reach, a gentle and sweet voice sounded from behind her. "Xiang'er, can I have a word with you?" Yu Xiang turned around to look. She frowned and thought for a moment before hesitantly saying, "Chang Yafu?" It had been 3 years since they last saw each other, and Chang Yafu had grown even more beautiful. However, in front of Yu Xiang, Chang Yafu was no longer beautiful. Her incomparably beautiful face immediately looked a little tacky. Chang Yafu forced a smile and spoke again. "Xiang'er, can I have a word with you?" Yu Xiang could roughly guess what she was going to say. She used her fingertips to touch the corner of her lips and said, "Then let's go." The master and servants followed Chang Yafu to the small courtyard where she lived. However, she was determined not to enter the house for a long chat. She only stopped under the large locust tree in the courtyard and quietly gazed at the misty mountain range in the distance. Her posture was extremely leisurely. Chang Yafu saw that she had no intention of initiating a conversation, so he could only disperse the servants in the courtyard. He also hinted at Yu Xiang's 2 maidservants to stand further away. Tao Hong's Lulu stood firm. Chang Yafu looked pleadingly at Yu Xiang. Yu Xiang lazily waved her hand. Only then did the 2 of them leave. They walked to the entrance of the courtyard and stood on the left and right like 2 door gods. Their eyes were unblinking as they stared at their master. "If you have something to say, just say it. I don't have the time to listen to you beat around the bush." Yu Xiang raised her chin. Chang Yafu originally wanted to exchange a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic, but when he heard this, he hurriedly said, "Xiang'er, I'm going to be removed from the server in a month. You know this too, right?" "I know." Yu Xiang lowered her head to admire her bright red nails. "Can you help me send this letter to your older brother? Back then it was my father's idea. I'm just a weak woman. How could I make the decision? I could only be manipulated by others. My feelings for your older brother are definitely not fake. After so many misunderstandings, he has to give me a chance to explain. You see, I'm already 19 this year. If he wants to break off the engagement, how would I have the face to see anyone in this lifetime? You're also a girl, so you should be able to understand my difficulties. Back then, older sister let you down. Older sister has long known that she was wrong. Please help older sister this time." When she spoke of her sorrow, Chang Yafu's tears flowed out. With both hands, he presented an exquisite envelope that emitted a fragrance. "I'm sorry. I've never thought of getting married in this lifetime. I really can't understand your difficulties." Yu Xiang blinked her feline eyes. Her expression was innocent and ignorant, but her mood had long since been ruined. Chang Yafu's sorrowful expression stiffened slightly. Yu Xiang's lips curled up into a mocking smile. She continued, "Don't play this trick of injuring yourself to gain my confidence. You want to marry my older brother? Why don't you take a look in the mirror and see if you're worthy? Can your father force you to address the legitimate daughter of the 3rd branch as your sister? Can your father force you to be close to 3rd aunt as close as mother and daughter? Can your father force you to exchange tokens of love with Yu Pinhong during the Lantern Festival? You already have 1 foot in his doorstep. Do you think that I, Marquis Yongla, don't know anything? Why don't you think about what my grandfather did in the past? He had so many subordinates under his command. My older brother remembers every single one of your scandals. On one hand, you're whispering sweet nothings to Yu Pinhong, and on the other, you're holding on to my older brother and refusing to let go. Aren't you afraid that you'll fall to your death?" Chang Yafu's tears were startled back. Yu Xiang brushed away her hand that was holding the letter. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Back then, my older brother was still a commoner, but 3rd uncle was already the minister of appointments. Yu Pinhong became a grand scholar and was praised by the emperor as a young hero. It's understandable that your Duke Jingguofu thought that his family could inherit the title of nobility. Don't talk to me about love or anything like that. I feel ashamed for you. In the end, it's just for your own selfish desires. If you were willing to give my older brother a word of encouragement and a good face when he was in despair, I wouldn't be so harsh to you today. She lowered her head and took out 5 taels of silver from her purse. She stuffed it into Chang Yafu's hand and earnestly said, "Next year is the Empress Dowager's 70th birthday. In order to pray for the Empress Dowager, the Emperor wishes to pardon the world. Third uncle's family will definitely be able to return from the land of exile. You and Yu Pinhong will be able to continue your previous fate. I'll say congratulations first. Please, I'll help you pay for the Iceman's silver. You mustn't be polite with me." After saying this, she even gave him an incomparably sweet smile. Older brother is such an outstanding man. What kind of wife can't he have? Why would he want a vain and fickle woman like you? If you can't treat him wholeheartedly, if you can't trust him wholeheartedly, if you can't give him strength at a critical moment, if you can't pour all your love into him and let him be happy for the rest of his life. I'm sorry, please go in peace. The young girl's smile was clearly so charming and moving, but in Chang Yafu's eyes, it was more repulsive than an evil spirit. Although he already knew that her temper was perverse and not easy to deal with, he didn't expect her to use such crude and vicious words to attack him. However, everything she said was the truth, leaving Chang Yafu unable to refute. He only felt that his clothes had been stripped off and his body was exposed in front of everyone's eyes. He had nowhere to hide. But if she didn't look for Yu Xiang, who else would be able to make Yu Pinyin listen to her words? She had no other choice. Chang Yafu blankly held the 5 taels of silver, his fingertips trembling violently. She thought that Yu Pinyin didn't know about the things she did, but it turned out that he knew everything. He was just treating her as a joke. If it was a joke, then it was a joke. It was fine even if he looked at it for a lifetime. She definitely couldn't let the family break off the engagement. Otherwise, the Duke Jingguofu's reputation would be ruined, and she wouldn't have the face to see anyone again. Moreover, Yu Pinyin currently held the high position of commander in the capital. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his power was monstrous. If she broke off this engagement, where would she go to find a husband more outstanding than Yu Pinyin? Rather than becoming the laughingstock of the entire Great Han dynasty, she would rather become the laughingstock of Marquis Yongle. When she had a firm foothold in the future, she would settle today's humiliation. Yu Xiang could see the strong unwillingness in her eyes, but he didn't think much of it. He waved his hand to call Taohong Lulu over. However, he didn't expect that many insects would suddenly fall from the trees, drenching her head and face. Moreover, a resentful voice came from above. "You actually dare to humiliate my older sister like this? I'll let you have a taste of my power." The author has something to say. Thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. By the way, happy Singles Day. Don't rush me to update. My family is busy with the funeral. I can't do without you guys this weekend. Chapter 35. Other than butterflies, Yu Xiang was afraid of all kinds of insects, especially those soft insects. Now that she was covered in them, some of them even burrowed into her undergarments through her collar. That feeling was not only frightening, but the hairs on the insects, which were finer than her pores, burrowed into her blood vessels upon contact with her skin, causing a large area of unbearable itchy blisters. Yu Xiang was scared silly. She sat stiffly in her wheelchair, not daring to move. She was afraid that the insects in her hair would also enter her collar when she swayed. Taohong Lulu, quickly, help me get rid of these insects. Her voice carried a strong sobbing tone. Lulu took out a handkerchief to help the young miss pat the insects. Taohong pushed a 12 to 13-year-old youth who had slipped down from the tree to the ground. The youth was Duke Jingguo's only legitimate son, Chang Qi. He had been spoiled since he was a child and was given the nickname of Devil Incarnate. Today he was holding a pair of bamboo chopsticks in the courtyard to catch insects. He collected a bottle and fed it to his thrush bird. Just as he was about to go down the tree, he saw his older sister bring a cripple in. He was curious and hid in the tree to eavesdrop. When he heard the end, his lungs were about to explode. Marquis Yongla's crippled younger sister also had a bad reputation in the capital. She was crafty, unkind, and had a perverse temperament. When she spoke, her words were as sharp as a knife. Only today did he know that she was even more hateful than the rumors said. Changqi opened the bottle and without thinking, poured the entire bottle of insects down. At this time, Tao Hong had pushed her to the ground and scraped her palm, so her hatred became even deeper. She climbed up and kicked Tao Hong over. She still had some sense and did not make a move on Yu Xiang. She only picked up the dead branches and leaves on the ground and threw them at her head, cursing that she was unclean. Chang Yafu originally wanted to stop her, but when he saw Yu Xiang's pitiful appearance and saw that she was about to cry, he felt great pleasure in his heart. He retreated a few steps and coldly watched from the side. Lulu swatted away the bugs on the outside of her clothes, but she couldn't deal with the bugs inside. She wanted to ask Tao Hong to come over and help push the mist back, but she was repeatedly stopped by Changqi, who even kicked her several times. Lulu saw that the situation was not good, so he left his master and Tao Hong and ran out. The bugs crawled in and out of her clothes, and a large number of small blisters appeared on her back. It was very uncomfortable. Yu Xiang suppressed the trembling of her body, gritted her teeth and said, "Chang Yafu, you're still as brainless as before. Based on what you and your brother have done today, don't even think about stepping into my Marquis Yongla in this lifetime." Chang Yafu finally came to his senses. Just as he was about to step forward to stop his younger brother from throwing stones at Yu Xiang's head, he saw Yu Pinyin striding over, followed by a sweaty Lulu. Yu Pinyin was known as the Jade-Faced King of Hell. At this moment, his eyes were filled with murderous intent, causing people to retreat. He grabbed Changqi by the neck and threw him far away, then looked at his younger sister. He saw that her eyes were closed and she was biting her lips. Her face was as pale as paper, and there were a few drops of tears on her thick eyelashes. They swayed along with her trembling body. Her head and body were covered with dead branches and leaves, and there were red marks on her forehead from being hit by stones. She looked pitiful and embarrassed. Yu Pinyin's heart fiercely clenched, and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He bent down to carry her, but she pushed him away and said in a trembling voice, "Don't press your hands on my back. It's itchy, painful, and there are a lot of bugs in my underwear." Yu Pinyin gently comforted her. "Big brother knows. I'll take you back now. Don't be afraid, Big brother is here." He hugged his younger sister's slender waist with one hand and supported her buttocks with the other. He carried her into his arms like he was carrying a child, and left with large strides. He didn't even look at Chang Yafu the entire time. Lulu bowed to Chang Yafu and said with a fake smile, "Miss Chang, thank you for taking care of Master today. When this servant returns, this servant will definitely report the truth to the old lady and have her personally thank you." After saying this, she pulled Tao Hong and left. Chang Yafu sprinted to the entrance of the courtyard, but the group of people had already left. He didn't know when, but a fine and dense spring rain had drifted down from the sky. When it fell on his skin, it was chilly and chilled his heart. Changqi clutched his aching buttocks and angrily said, "What kind of plaything is that prefecture you? How dare they treat this air like this? Sister, don't be sad. I'll definitely have father help us get justice." Chang Yafu looked at him in disbelief for a long time, then suddenly smiled sadly. "What kind of plaything is that prefecture you? Let me tell you, even the princes have to show some respect to that plaything. If you don't want father to punish you according to the family rules, then come with me to apologize." Changqi refused and reluctantly nodded under Chang Yafu's threats and promises. He left with a belly full of resentment. As soon as Yu Pinyin put his younger sister down, he saw her quickly pull off the pearl hairpin in her hair, untie her hair bun, and constantly scratch the roots of her hair. Following that, she took off her smock, outer robe and inner clothes. In the blink of an eye, only a small pink doo-doo was left to wrap around her exquisite body. Although she was only 14 years old, the young girl's body had already developed to perfection. It could be said that if she gained a little weight, she would gain a little weight, and if she lost a little weight, she would lose a little weight. In particular, the 2 round lumps on her chest trembled under her frantic patting, as if they were about to jump out. The already pitiful amount of cloth simply couldn't hide this extremely seductive style. However, she didn't seem to be aware of this. She lifted the doo-doo and looked inside, then reached behind her to untie the knot. Only then did Yu Pinyin recover from his burning state. He grabbed her hands and placed his large palm on the back of her delicate and smooth neck, pressing this insanely beautiful body into his embrace. The round lumps on her chest were covered, but the soft touch was directly pressed against his chest. There was also a faint but alluring fragrance that lingered around his nose. Yu Pinyin's Adam's apple moved up and down. He completely didn't know what to do with the person in his embrace. It was like hugging a ball of fire in the middle of winter. He knew that he would be burned to death, but he couldn't bear to let go. It was simply too terrible. However, very quickly, his attention was attracted by the large patch of blisters on his younger sister's back. The snow-white skin was covered with red and swollen scars. The scene was truly shocking. His eyes instantly surged with murderous intent. Lulu stood helplessly at the door with the ointment in her hand. She stammered, "Master Ho, let this servant help misapply the ointment. Could you please leave for a moment? Although they were brother and sister, you shouldn't be so unrestrained, right?" Tao Hong didn't notice at all. He was busy cleaning up the bugs that had fallen on the bed. Yu Pinyin gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to let go of his younger sister, she hugged his waist and cried out, "Older brother, you have to help me whip Changqi to death." And Chang Yafu, she actually allowed her younger brother to bully me. If you marry her in the future, I don't know how you'll torture me. With such a vicious sister-in-law, I don't need to stay at home anymore. Just send me to the country estate. Yu Pinyin's heart felt as if it was being stabbed by a knife. He gently stroked her hair with his fingers. His tone was extremely gentle, but his expression was abnormally cold. "Xiang'er, don't worry. Older brother will definitely teach him a lesson he won't forget. As for Chang Yafu, he can forget about stepping into my Marquillongla for the rest of his life." Only then was Yu Xiang satisfied. She sobbed and let go of his hand. Yu Pinyin turned his head away and walked out of the courtyard with stiff steps. He stood in the corridor for a long time. The fire in his heart couldn't be extinguished no matter what. He could only step into the light drizzle and let the cold raindrops help him sober up. The two dragon scale guards standing guard outside the courtyard were worried. They kept looking at him, wondering if they should give him an oil paper umbrella. Although the rain wasn't heavy, it was very dense. In a short 15 minutes, the lieutenant's hair was completely soaked. The pitter-patter of water slid down his hair and into his lapels. Just as they were hesitating, they heard the lieutenant coldly order, "Find a basket of small bugs. They're not poisonous." The two guards obeyed and left. Anyone who had stayed in the Dragonscale Guard's torture chamber knew that the small bugs that Commander Yu spoke of were completely different from the small bugs that normal people spoke of. After standing in the rain for a while, the burning sensation in his chest slowly faded away. Yu Pinyin was just about to walk away when he saw Chang Yafu and Changqi walking over, trembling with fear. "Pinyin, I brought Cheerer here to apologize to you. I hope that you'll be magnanimous and not bicker with him. He's still young. It's inevitable that he'll lose his sense of propriety when he causes trouble. I've already taught him a lesson." "Big brother Yu, I was wrong." Changqi lowered her head. She didn't dare to meet Yu Pinyin's eyes. Suddenly, she felt indignant and raised her head to shout, "But Yu Xiang was also wrong. She humiliated my older sister and said that she wasn't worthy of marrying you. Who does she think she is? How can she make decisions about your marriage with my older sister?" Yu Pinyin nodded expressionlessly. "It's true that our prefecture you can't make decisions about my marriage with your older sister, but it's up to your Duke Jingua estate to make the decision. If you say that she can marry you, then she'll marry you. If you say that she can't marry you, then she can break off the engagement at any time. Our prefecture you has known this for a long time. It's Xiang'er who doesn't know proper etiquette." Changqi was rendered speechless by his sarcasm. She really couldn't bring up what happened back then. It was indeed the Duke Jingua estate's betrayal. Chang Yafu's face was deathly pale. He was on the verge of collapsing. Right at that moment, two Dragonscale guards came in carrying a bamboo basket. They looked at the domain chief with questioning eyes. Yu Pinyin pointed at Changqi, then hurriedly left. Changqi was at a loss. Just as she was about to look into the bamboo basket, she saw the two dragon scale guards walk in front of her and pour the contents of the basket onto her body. It was a bunch of snakes as thick as a pinky finger. They had just woken up from their hibernation and were rather lazy. Some of them coiled around the top of her head, unwilling to move, while others burrowed into her clothes in search of a warm place to stay. Changqi was immediately scared out of her wits. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Her voice was loud enough to disperse the thick dark clouds in the sky. Chang Yafu was also scared out of her wits. She continuously retreated, raised her oil paper umbrella, and jumped and screamed to chase the snakes away. When Yu Xiang heard the commotion, she ordered Tao Hong Lulu to carry her to the window to check. She immediately convulsed with laughter. Fortunately, Yu Pinyin didn't kill her. The snakes she found were all non-venomous, so they were only used to scare her. The siblings screamed for half an hour. Seeing that they were about to faint from exhaustion, the two dragon scale guards finally sent someone to pass a message to Duke Jingwa, telling him to come and carry her. It wasn't easy for them to have such a legitimate son. Duke Jingwa and his wife hated that they couldn't keep him in their arms and in their mouths at all times. Seeing their son come back battered and exhausted, with a large pool of urine on his crotch and his hands and feet trembling non-stop, it was obvious that he was scared out of his wits. The husband and wife felt as if their hearts were being cut by a knife. They grabbed their daughter and scolded her. Then, they aggressively went to find old Madame Yu to reason with her. This Yu Pinyin really spoiled Yu Xiang too much. He was so unforgiving even when children were playing around. He was simply unreasonable. The author has something to say. Thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 36. When Duke Jingwa and his wife arrived at the small courtyard, the servant girl that Lulu sent to report had just left. The matriarch was currently suppressing a belly full of anger and didn't reveal a trace of a smile. Duchess Jingwa opened her mouth and began to interrogate. I say, old madam, Yu Pinyin is a bit too ungentlemanly. Cheer and Yu Xiang bickered and caused a ruckus, yet he actually had someone pour a basket of snakes on Cheer's body. What is he trying to do? He's a dignified commander-in-chief, so how can he bicker with a brat? The matriarch closed her eyes and twirled her prayer beads. When she finished speaking, she was just about to speak when she saw Yu Pinyin walk in with his half-wet hair. He said in a heavy voice, my younger sister was covered in caterpillars by him. Right now she's covered in cuts and bruises, and the pain is unbearable. He doesn't have a single wound and was only frightened. I'm already being merciful. If you still don't know what's good for you, be careful that I don't peel off a layer of his skin. Everyone knew that a smiling Marquis Yongla was far more terrifying than an expressionless Marquis Yongla. His expression was as gentle as the spring wind and rain, but in reality, that smile contained a complete disregard for life. Only then did Duke Jingwa vaguely remember that the person in front of him was no longer the destitute brat that could be bullied. Instead, he was the commander-in-chief personally appointed by the emperor. He could kill people above his rank, act first and report later. Of all the civil and military officials in the imperial court, only the emperor could control him. Inside and outside the imperial court, on the battlefield, countless souls died by his hands. If all of them fell into the 9 depths of hell, perhaps even the palace of the king of hell would collapse. Only then did Duke Jingwa know that he was afraid, and his legs trembled. Duchess Jingwa didn't understand the matters of the imperial court, and thought that Yu Pinyin was the brat that she could bully. Unexpectedly, she assumed the posture of a mother-in-law and endlessly reprimanded him. Yu Pinyin wasn't in the mood to listen to her finish and sneered. How do you think he and Xianger got into a fight? It was Xianger who had exposed the matter of Chang Yafu exchanging tokens of love with Yu Pinhong at the Lantern Festival. The siblings had been so angry that they had attacked Xianger. Madam, you must be very clear about this matter. Didn't you make an agreement with third aunt in the future? Once third uncle inherits the title and Yu Pinhong becomes the heir apparent, you will come to me to break off the engagement? I've been waiting for you. It's a pity that the heavens play tricks on people. Not long after, third uncle's family was sent to prison. This marriage didn't take place, so they thought of me again. What do you take me for, Yu Pinyin? A good-for-nothing who specializes in picking up used shoes? Duke Jinghua and his wife suddenly opened their eyes wide, as if they had seen a ghost. The old lady accidentally broke the prayer beads and asked anxiously, "There's such a thing? Exchanging tokens of love? Good, 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 as expected of my good granddaughter-in-law. So shameless, so lewd. You still have the face to come here and denounce us? Someone beat them out of here. Hurry up and fight." The old lady stood up and bellowed angrily. She knew that the Chong family wanted to form a marriage alliance with the third branch, but she didn't know that Chong Yafu already had an affair with the third branch's legitimate son. The Chong family actually wanted to shove a piece of trash into his prefecture Yu's hands. What wishful thinking. The servants loudly agreed and went out to look for sticks. If they stayed any longer, they would be beaten and their reputations would be ruined. Duke Jinghua and his wife buried their heads and covered their faces as they ran away. The old lady had a belly full of anger, but she had nowhere to vent it. She slammed the table and asked sternly, "You already knew about this matter? Why didn't you tell me? If I had known that Chong Yafu was so unrestrained, I would have broken off the engagement when the old Duke Jinghua hadn't died yet. How could I have tolerated him for so many years? This won't do. Wait until next month when he's out of service, I'll go and break off the engagement. He's simply going too far." When she thought about how she had almost been persuaded by Duke Jinggua's wife to agree to this marriage, she suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Yu Pinyin gently patted her back and gently said, "I'm telling you now, yet you're still so angry. If I told you back then, wouldn't you have been so angry that you'd be bedridden for a few more months? How could grandson bear to do that?" The old lady's heart ached like it was being twisted, but she also gnashed her teeth in hatred. She pulled on her grandson's hand and wiped away her tears. How much had this child suffered while she was unaware of it? She didn't dare to think too deeply about it. How could his grandfather arrange such a terrible marriage for him? When he went to the Yellow Springs, he would definitely find that old thing to settle this debt. Yu Pinyin smiled slightly as he wiped the old lady's tears. When Xiang found out about this, she was even more agitated than the old ancestor. She even took out the dagger he gave her and said that she was going to stab Chong Yafu. It was enough to have two people by his side who treated him wholeheartedly. He had also tempered himself for many years before he truly understood that what should be given up should be decisively given up, and what should be cherished must be firmly grasped. The old lady and her grandson stayed in silence for a while before she felt much better. She saw that his hair was half wet and he had changed his clothes. Just as she was about to ask him why he was taking a bath in this cold weather, a dragon scale guard hastily rushed in and reported, "Commander, the Crown Prince requests your presence." The old lady immediately felt that something was amiss and hurriedly urged her grandson to leave. Meanwhile, the Crown Princess was in a good mood after receiving the dragon phoenix lot that Yu Xiang had drawn. She was resting in a side room in the rear hall when she saw the spring rain outside. Several plum blossoms spat out bright red flower buds that looked especially adorable with water droplets. She ignored the palace maid's attempts to stop her, and held up an oil paper umbrella to look for the plum blossoms. Strolling to the edge of the plum blossom forest, she saw a drooping flower gate that was wide open. Opposite was a courtyard where ordinary people lived. Although it didn't occupy a large area, there were at least 7 or 8 families squeezed together. It was now the end of spring and the weather was cold. It didn't feel cold when the sun was out, but when it rained it was piercingly cold. In addition, the mountaintop was much colder than the flat ground. It was simply impossible to live without burning charcoal. The Taoist children were afraid that the pilgrims would fall ill from the cold, so they piled up a lot of charcoal in a corner of the courtyard. They also burned a large pot of fire at the side. Anyone who wanted to start a stove would have to come and collect the sparks themselves. A beautiful servant girl was currently adding sparks to the fire she had brought along while adding charcoal to the pot. This was to prevent the fire from being extinguished when others came. The charcoal crackled as it entered the pot and emitted a large cloud of thick smoke, causing the servant girl to cough repeatedly. The crown princess covered her nose and mouth. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard a female physician beside her shout, "Not good. There's something wrong with the smoke." Everyone panicked and didn't know how to react. They saw the crown princess suddenly stagger, clutching her abdomen as she softly cried, Quickly help me back, my stomach hurts. She's having a miscarriage. Senior servant Song hurriedly ordered people to lift the crown princess and quickly rushed back. As if remembering something, she shouted at the nearby Dragonscale guard. Quickly go and find His Highness the Crown Prince and Commandant Yu. Also capture that girl. The Dragonscale guard obeyed the order and left. The head of the Baiyun monastery was proficient in medicine. After making a diagnosis, he discovered that the crown princess was about to give birth prematurely. He hurriedly ordered people to prepare the delivery room and immediately knelt in the Leizu hall to pray. The accompanying female physicians and midwives were on high alert, their hearts burning with anxiety. If anything happened to the crown princess or the fetus in her womb, not to mention them, even 50 to 60% of the pilgrims in the monastery wouldn't be able to escape Commandant Yu's butcher's knife. The emperor was the eldest son of the first wife. Back then, he should have naturally inherited the throne, but he was almost killed by his brothers. From then on, he valued the children of the first wife and concubines even more. If the crown prince was incompetent, it would have been fine. However, the crown prince was both virtuous and talented. It was just that it was a bit difficult for him to produce an heir. Up until now, he had only produced a concubine's son. This was the only area where the emperor was dissatisfied with the crown prince. The emperor had been eagerly waiting for this grandson of his for 6 years. It was no wonder that the crown princess was so nervous that she couldn't sleep at night. Just as the melon was about to be ripe for the harvest, someone actually plotted against him. It was easy to imagine how furious the emperor was. Not only were the palace servants and the monastery head bitterly disappointed, but even the crown prince's heart was bitterly disappointed. He was afraid that losing his eldest son would cause his imperial father to dislike him. When he saw Yu Pinyin striding in, he suppressed his anger and coldly said, "Yi Feng, investigate this for us. This us is usually too benevolent and unexpectedly cause them to harbor thoughts that they shouldn't have. If we find the mastermind behind this us will definitely report this to imperial father and have him grind his bones to dust. This humble one will definitely not disappoint your highness." Yu Pinyin didn't waste any words. He cupped his hands and headed to the prison to interrogate the suspect. The Dragonscale guard had borrowed the cellar of the Baiyun monastery to build a torture chamber, and was currently torturing the maidservant who added charcoal. The maidservant was truly unyielding. Her body was covered in whip scars, but she didn't relent. She insisted that she had just come to the capital from Diyu City with her master's family, and had rushed to the ceremony to join in the fun. She had nothing to do with the various powers in the capital, and was wrongly accused. The Dragonscale guard's style of doing things had always been ruthless. They didn't care if you were guilty or not, they would torture you first. The two people executing the punishment didn't argue with her. They took a splint and were about to use it. After 2 splints, the maidservant couldn't take it anymore and screamed miserably, "I'm innocent, I didn't do anything. I'm not a maidservant. I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household. How dare you treat me like this? If my family finds you, they will definitely tear you to pieces." The Marquis household? Which Marquis household? One of them laughed contemptuously. Tear them to pieces. Ordinary Dragonscale guard didn't even dare to touch a first-rank official. In this world, other than the emperor, only Commandant Yu could tear them to pieces. Not to mention that this maidservant was full of nonsense. Even if she really came from a wealthy family, what could she do to them? The maidservant shook her head repeatedly and screamed, "I don't know which Marquis household it is. I only know that 14 years ago, I was mistaken for someone else and my father died under a bandit's knife. You can ask around, I guarantee that you'll know. I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household. I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household." Suddenly, she felt that her threat just now was really inappropriate, so she hurriedly tried to remedy it. "As long as the two of you are willing to help me find my family will definitely repay the two of you handsomely. Today's harsh treatment will also be written off. I still have the swaddling clothes that my family left for me in my room. The cloth is a tribute from the palace. I can show it to you." The more she spoke, the more bizarre it became. The 2 Dragonscale guards shook their heads and sneered, their hands gradually becoming heavier. As soon as Yu Pinyin stepped over the threshold, he heard the maidservant's threats and bribes. His stern expression didn't change, but his heart was slightly moved. He quickly walked over and waved his two subordinates away. He pinched the maidservant's chin and lifted her face to carefully examine it. The maidservant was already in tears. Feeling the cold temperature on her chin, she couldn't help but tremble. She forced herself to open her eyes and immediately gritted her teeth and growled, "It's you again. Isn't it enough that you harmed me once? You want to harm me a second time? What kind of enmity do you have with me?" This question was really inexplicable. Since when did the Grand Marquis Yongla have any interaction with a lowly maidservant? The two Dragonscale guards increasingly felt that there was something wrong with this person's head. Yu Pinyin didn't answer. Seeing that her appearance was 70 to 80% similar to that of the Lin clan, he felt a little more confident. He opened her sleeve and saw that there was indeed an orchid-shaped red birthmark on her wrist. The sister that he couldn't find for 4 years was actually met in prison. One was an interrogator, and the other was a prisoner in a cage. He didn't know what the heavens had arranged. Yu Pinyin took 2 steps back and said indifferently, "There's no need to torture her. First, take her to the prison to await trial." The 2 Dragonscale guards agreed in a low voice and didn't dare to ask any more questions. Yu Pinyin walked out of the prison. He didn't feel happy or relieved, and he didn't feel the excitement of finding his family. The only thought in his mind was, why did she appear here and get involved in this matter? Was it a trap set by someone with ulterior motives? All kinds of doubts were accumulated in his heart. He couldn't help but frown and decided to investigate the case first. The author has something to say. Thank you to my little cute creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 37. After investigation, the servant girl's name was Kai Chi, and her original name was Shun Miao Chi. She was the first-rank servant girl of Zhao Minhui, the eldest daughter of Zhao and Shun. Yunzhou was located in the southernmost part of Lingnan. Miasma pervaded the air and transportation was inconvenient. It was a famous place for barren hills and unruly rivers. It was very difficult to be a magistrate there. Most of them were from poor families without any foundation or unlucky people who offended influential people. This Zhao and Shun not only came from a poor family but because of his upright character, he offended many colleagues. Seeing that he could not survive in the capital, he had no choice but to submit a letter to apply for a transfer. Because no one helped him mediate, he was finally sent to Yunzhou and stayed there for more than 10 years. The Dragonscale guard checked him again and again but did not find anything suspicious. However, they found a problem with the charcoal. It turned out that the charcoal piled up in the corner was soaked in safflower, peach kernel, musk, Sichuan acaranthes and other herbs to make a medicine. After burning it in the fire, the medicine was forced out. Safflower and other herbs were not good for the fetus, and after a special concoction, it could be called a tiger and wolf medicine. Every household came to add charcoal, and the smell of smoke had already filled the temple for a long time. However, the crown princess was far away, and after the smell of smoke was diluted, the female doctor did not find it. There were a few pregnant women like the crown princess in the temple, and they all started to bleed that night. Yu Pinyin took the file and read it repeatedly. Finally, he called a few capable subordinates and ordered them to follow the clues of the charcoal and herbs to investigate. A few hundred caddies of charcoal had to be soaked, and the amount of medicine needed was very large. No matter how well it was covered, there would always be traces left. Moreover, they could catch a few suspects during the purchasing process. He left behind the last 2 people and ordered them to investigate Shun Miao Chi. Not to mention the other's experience from childhood to adulthood. Even the few grains of rice she ate and the few mouthfuls of water she drank had to be reported truthfully. After everyone left, he then revealed a gloomy and anxious expression. Finding his biological younger sister also meant that he found Xiang-er's family. After the matter was made known, Xiang-er would definitely be estranged from him, and might even follow them to leave the Marquis household and go to Lingnan. Because of this concern, Yu Pinyin wasn't very keen on finding his sister. He only sent out a trusted servant, not a Dragonscale guard. When the Lin clan urged him, he would ask about it. He couldn't remember anything else. Otherwise, with his ability as a commander, he wouldn't have searched for 4 years without any results. Not to mention that he didn't recognize his own family. How could his younger sister, whom he had never even seen since childhood, be compared to Xiang'er, who they depended on each other for survival? If he could find it, then so be it. If he couldn't find it, then he wouldn't mind wasting time like this. However, even if he didn't look for her, the heavens would send her to him on their own accord. And even in such a dangerous situation, if Shen Miaoqi's identity was verified, it must be reported to the crown prince and the emperor. But when to report it and how to report it, Yu Pinyin had to consider it again and again. If the crown princess was able to give birth to the twins, then this matter would naturally be easy to discuss. If the crown princess and the fetus met with an accident, then the marquis household would be implicated. After considering all the consequences, Yu Pinyin did not let Shen Miaoqi be released and still kept her in the dungeon. He would wait for the case to come to light and then report it to the emperor for the emperor to make a decision. He was the sharpest knife in the emperor's hands, a sharp weapon that existed to clear the crown prince's path to the throne. Even though the crown prince had both ability and integrity, his methods were too gentle. The emperor was afraid that the crown prince would be suppressed by the powerful officials and relatives after 100 years. Thus he boldly and decisively reorganized the court, leaving the crown prince a peaceful and prosperous era. The crown prince was absolutely not a talent to open up new territories, but he had the ability to protect what he had achieved. The great Han dynasty no longer had internal and external troubles, thus the emperor could die in peace. And the reason why he was at ease to give such monstrous power to Yu Pinyin was because of Marquis Yongla's loyalty to the imperial family for generations and his wisdom in judging the situation. Because of this, Yu Pinyin did not dare to hide anything from the emperor. As for the old lady, he did not leak any information to save her from being alarmed and afraid. Yu Xiang did not know that the main character had already entered the capital and had met with Yu Pinyin. She had a large blister on her back and was very uncomfortable. After bidding farewell to the old lady, she went down the mountain to return home. Fang Zhichen saw her leave and casually found an excuse to go down the mountain with the Pei clan. He was currently still living in the marquis household, and thought that he might be able to get close to this beauty in private when he returned. Yu Xiu had sent people to keep an eye on Fang Zhichen. Seeing him leave, she hurriedly followed, saying that she wanted to go back and take care of her sister. The old lady did not believe this at all, but with Xiang'er in the residence, there would not be any trouble, so she nodded. At this time, the news of the crown princess giving birth prematurely had not yet spread. Baiyun Taoist temple was also not closed, so their journey was very smooth. After walking half a li, the entire mountain peak was surrounded by dragon scale guard. Not even a fly could fly out, much less a person. However, the crown prince's nature was magnanimous, and he loved the people as if they were his own children. He only captured all the Taoists in the temple and the residents in the courtyard. Other people who were not suspicious were recorded by the dragon scale guard. After they wrote down their statements, they were released back to their own courtyards. This action won him a great deal of goodwill from the people. With Yu Pinyin present, the crown prince simply let go of his hands and waited for the crown princess to give birth. This was his first legitimate son, the grandson that his imperial father had been looking forward to for 6 years. If he had a son in one fell swoop, then his position as the crown prince would be truly stable. Even if he had an accident, based on his imperial father's temperament, the throne would only be passed to his legitimate grandson, and not any of his brothers. Baiyun Taoist temple was naturally not as comfortable as home. As soon as Yu Xiang entered the room, she had people heat the earth. When the temperature rose, she immediately took off her clothes. Wearing only a small doudou, she picked up a bronze mirror to observe the blisters on her back. Lulu took the bronze mirror and helped her adjust the angle. She hesitated and said, "Miss, in the future, you have to avoid Master Ho. Even if you are biological siblings, you can't do that." "Do what?" Yu Xiang untied the knot of her vest and also took off her doudou. 2 plump white lumps trembled as they jumped out, causing Lulu's face to turn red and her mouth to dry up. She thought that the Mrs. body was really too beautiful. As a woman, she could not resist the temptation. She did not know how Master Ho felt thinking of this. Her expression changed slightly. She secretly cursed herself for being possessed. Then she cleared her throat and said, that is, you have to take off your clothes in front of him. Today you only have a dudu left. Even though you are biological siblings, you should still avoid it. Yu Xiang carelessly waved her hand. I know. I was just scared silly by the insects. Although she said this, she did not take it to heart. In the end, she could not agree with the ancient women's cruel view of chastity. If someone accidentally touched her, she would cut off her arm. What kind of logic was this? Moreover, Yu Pinyin was her older brother. What was there that she could not see? Lulu nodded in relief. She took out the jade face cream that Dr. Piao had sent last time and evenly applied it on her master's back. The blisters dried and scabbed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yu Xiang let out a comfortable moan, causing Lulu to swallow her saliva. She secretly thought that this was the meaning of the word, stunner. Tao Hong was burning mugwort in the outer room. When spring came, the ground was always damp. If the house was not occupied for a day, it would be full of mold. If the mugwort was not smoked, it would be very unpleasant. After burning the mugwort, he prepared to take out the ashes and throw them away. However, he saw senior servant Cho from eldest Mrs. Courtyard walk in on tiptoe. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you acting so sneaky? Tao Hong pointed at her and asked loudly. Shush. Cho Clan put a finger to her lips and made a shushing motion. Tao Hong also became nervous. He quickly opened the curtain for her and let her in quickly. What's wrong? You is up to something again? Yu Xiang lazily put on her outer robe and tied it loosely with a jade belt around her waist. Lulu reached out and pulled her robe closer, covering her sexy collarbone and the seductive cleavage in the middle. Cho Clan lowered her head and said, replying to eldest Miss asked her servant Qingya to bring young Master Fong to her room tonight at 7:15. What do you think we should do? Yu Xiang glanced at the hourglass. There was still less than an hour until 7:15. She ordered, let them meet. I want to see what she wants. If I don't catch her in the act, she will never learn her lesson. Before 7, drive away all the servants in the courtyard. In any case, leave her some face. Bring me my mink cloak. I'll go take a look. Liulu hesitated and said, young miss, just let us servants handle this matter. If you go, it will harm your reputation. Yu Xiang sneered, I don't expect to get married in this lifetime. What's the use of a reputation? Helping my brother guard this huge marquee Yongla is the right thing to do. Go bring me the cloak. Lulu saw that she had made up her mind and could only go get the cloak. She also had 2 strong women quietly carry her to the back of Yu Siu's room. Cho Clan hid in the side room and watched through the window. When they saw that Qingye had left, they used all kinds of excuses to get rid of the people in the courtyard. Yu Siu was flustered and out of her wits. She didn't notice anything amiss. At 7:15, Qingye tiptoed into the courtyard. She first looked around the courtyard and was overjoyed when she saw that no one was there. She hurriedly waved for Fang Zhichen to come in. Fang Zhichen flashed into the room while Qingye stood outside to keep a lookout. Yu Siu cried when she saw Fang Zhichen. She sobbed, young Master Fang, you're finally here. Young miss, why are you looking for me? Fang Zhichen cupped his hands in a cultured and refined manner. His gaze stopped on Yu Siu's tear-stained face. He was also very fond of this delicate and pretty woman. However, no matter how conceited he was, he knew that the Marquis household wouldn't marry both young misses to him. Compared to Yu Siu and Yu Xiang, he was more moved by Yu Xiang's charming face. Moreover, her status was more to his liking. Although he wasn't fated to be with Yu Siu's adoration was very useful to him. Thinking that he could at least fulfill her last wish, he followed Qingye to the rear courtyard. Fortunately, Yu Pinyin and the matriarch had taken many servants with them. Qingye was also familiar with the patrol guards changing shifts. Otherwise, he would have been seen by others. Yu Siu used a handkerchief to wipe her tears. She then looked at him affectionately and said, young master, do you know why our 8 characters don't match? Why? Someone is interfering. They bribed the head of the Baiyun monastery to say that our 8 characters don't match and want to ruin our marriage. If young master is interested in me, Then have Madame Pei find a respectable Taoist or monk and bring him to the Marquis household to examine my 8 characters. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, they have nothing to say. Does young master think this is feasible? Fang Zhichen stammered for a long time, unable to speak. He couldn't bear to reject Yu Siyu's deep feelings, but he also didn't want to marry her. Yu Xiang, who was at the back of the room, was so angry that she laughed. She ordered Tao Hong and Lu Lu to push her out. The sound of the wheelchair turning caused Yu Siyu's expression to change greatly. Qingya, who was outside the door, was pressed to the ground by the Qiu clan's men. They tore off her clothes and tied her up tightly. Yu Xiang ordered Tao Hong and Lu Lu to light a lantern. She raised her chin slightly and looked at the 2 people who had rushed out of the room. Older sister is in such a good mood. You're having a private meeting with your lover in the middle of the night. If the old ancestor knew about this, she would be so moved that she would cry. The author has something to say. Thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 38. Yu Siyu was scared out of her wits, but she had no choice but to maintain her composure and yell, Yu Xiang, you actually colluded with this old dog to harm me. You are so vicious. The Qiu clan curled their lips in disdain. Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows and chuckled. If I wanted to harm you, would I have dismissed all the servants in this courtyard? Right now, all I have to do is clap my hands and shout, and a spoiled girl like you will definitely be caught and drowned in a pig cage. Yu Siyu was scared out of her wits when she heard this, and she unconsciously hid behind Fang Zhichen. Fang Zhichen had no choice but to bite the bullet and step forward. He cupped his hands and bowed. Second Miss has misunderstood. This humble one has no personal feelings for eldest Miss, and we are not confessing our feelings to each other. We are discussing the matter of annulling the engagement. He paused, then continued with a red face. The person this humble one truly admires is Second Miss, and I have already discussed this with my mother. In a few days I will invite Iceman to propose marriage. This humble one has not thought things through before coming here. I hope Second Miss can forgive this humble one. This humble one does not have any romantic feelings for eldest Miss, but I pity her. He privately believed that Yu Xiang was young, disabled, and had a low self-esteem. Seeing such a handsome and talented man fall in love with her, there was no reason for her not to be moved. Therefore, the scandal of trespassing could be skipped over. No matter how smart Yu Xiang was, she could never have imagined that Fang Zhichen would say something like this. One moment he was caught having a secret meeting with Yu Siyu, and the next moment he confessed to her. One day, he wanted to marry a concubine's daughter, and the next day, he took a fancy to a legitimate daughter. How shameless! Who did he think he was? The reincarnation of Pan En? Yu Siyu stared at Fang Zhichen in shock. She could not believe her ears. Tao Hong was furious. He pointed at him and scolded, "You lecher! My master has never met you before. What the hell do you admire? Don't throw dirty water on my master." Fang Zhichen gestured and explained. At least he made it clear that they had met once in the Taoist temple. Yu Xiang narrowed her eyes and asked, "I can't walk. Why do you want to marry me? Who's going to take care of your mansion's affairs, your internal affairs, and your rear residence?" Fang Zhichen couldn't help but relax and smile when he saw that she had asked so many questions. This humble one will first marry my cousin. The household affairs, the household, and the inner residence will all be handed over to her. Even if Miss has difficulty bearing children, the children she gives birth to will be under Miss's name and will recognize Miss as their mother. There was no need to worry about how the young lady was living in the Marquis household, or how she would live in the Fang family. I will definitely take good care of Miss and not let Miss suffer the slightest grievance. My cousin is gentle and obedient. She grew up in the Fang family. If Miss has any difficulties, she will take care of it for Miss and serve Miss wholeheartedly. Yu Xiang gently rubbed her lips with her fingertips. When he finished speaking, she couldn't help but laugh. Her delicate and beautiful face became even more moving under the candlelight. The red dot between her eyebrows faintly emitted a red light that could suck a person's soul into her zifu. Fang Zhichen was dazed for a moment, his heart thumping wildly. However, her expression quickly turned cold and she said sarcastically, Your cousin is taking care of the household's affairs, managing the internal affairs, and managing the inner residence. Is this status a concubine or a wife? Not only do you humiliate me by taking a concubine as your wife, but you also want me to help you raise your concubine's children. In the future, when they grow up, they will logically divide my dowry. Do you think I'm a fool? Even a fool wouldn't do such a despicable thing. She sneered and continued, not to mention that I'm only crippled. Even if my entire body was paralyzed, I still wouldn't like you. In terms of appearance, in terms of talent, in terms of family background, and in terms of character, which part of you is worthy of me? What right do you have to speak to me in such a tone as if you are giving me a favor? If not for my marquis household, your Fong family would have collapsed and become mud in less than 2 months. At that time, you would no longer be the Tanhua scholar of the Great Han Dynasty, but a stray dog. You don't even have the qualifications to carry my shoes. She picked up the horsewhip and fiercely whipped the armrest of the wheelchair. She scolded, "Hurry up and get out of here, or else I'll break your dog legs." Fong Zhichen was stunned by her words. He couldn't believe that the woman in front of him who was as cold as ice was the beautiful woman who smiled brightly during the day. The words that came out of her mouth were not words, but sharp knives that directly cut him into pieces, dripping with blood. The great humiliation and anger suffocated him. He stood in place without moving, his face alternating between green and white. Yu Xiang waved at Lulu. "Go, call all the patrol guards over. If I kill him, my brother will help me deal with the aftermath." Fong Zhichen remembered that Yu Pinyin was the only person in the Great Han Dynasty who could kill imperial officials without asking for a reason. With his means, even if he destroyed the Fong family, no one would say a word. Not to mention that the Fong family had so many deadly secrets that could be used against them. He covered his face and left. This back and forth, up and down, was enough to see the emperor's style of doing things. He was very fair in court and dealt with everything according to the rules. He punished those who should be punished, and rewarded those who should be rewarded. He was impartial. Fong Zhichen's talent had nothing to do with his family background, so he gave Fong Zhichen an official title. If the Fong clan was indeed guilty, Fong Zhichen would be punished according to the laws of the Great Han Dynasty, and he would be demoted according to the laws of the Great Han Dynasty. However, Yu Xiang wouldn't tell Yu Siyu these things. Even if she did, she wouldn't believe her and would use the greatest malice to guess her intentions. Yu Pinyin's status was special, and he had made countless enemies in court. In these past few years, Yu Xiang hated that she couldn't cultivate until she was invulnerable to poison and invulnerable to swords and spears, just so she wouldn't be a burden to her brother. She didn't have many friends, and she rarely spoke when she went out. Today, Marquis Yongla only had contact with a few old friends of the matriarch, and almost never walked around the capital. She slowly led the Marquis household to the path of a lonely official, because this was what the emperor wanted to see. Even her unreasonable and overbearing behavior, and Yu Pinyin's unprincipled doting on her, were all things that the emperor was satisfied with. Yu Pinyin needed a weakness, and not everything was perfect. She did everything that she could do, just to let Yu Pinyin go further and more smoothly. However, Yu Siyu kept on doing stupid things. First, she curried favor with a noble lady, and then she tried to marry into a noble family. Why didn't she think about it? With the special status of the commander, how could the emperor be willing to see the prefecture Yu and those old aristocratic families work together? The emperors will doomed Yu Siyu to marry into an ordinary family, and live an ordinary life. Therefore, the matriarch rejected many families that were more prominent than the Fong family in order to reassure the emperor. However, a mere salt transport envoy, Si Yuntong, was able to make Yu Siyu lose her rationality. If she knew that there were other families that came to propose marriage, and they were all rejected by the matriarch, wouldn't she hate the matriarch to the bone? Thinking of this, Yu Xiang felt powerless. He waved his hand and said, "Lock her up in the room. When the old ancestor comes back, we'll deal with her separately." He then pointed at Qingya. "This girl will be flogged 30 times first, then locked up in the woodshed." The Qiu clan complied and pushed Yu Siyu into the room. Yu Siyu fiercely spat at the Qiu clan and shouted, "Yu Xiang, what are you trying to show off in front of me for? Let me tell you, you're just a wild." Before she could finish her sentence, The Cho clan covered her mouth and locked her hands behind her back. They then casually found a handkerchief from the sewing basket and stuffed it into her mouth. Her curses immediately turned into indistinct whimpers. Yu Xiang naturally knew what she was going to say. He pursed his lips and left in the drizzle. The Cho clan continued to detain Yu Xiu. When they all walked away, they advised in low voices, "My eldest miss, please stop. So what if Miss Xiang, isn't of the Marquis family's bloodline? The old lady has her eyes on her. Master Ho has his eyes on her. Then isn't she the same? Not to mention that you can't compare to her. Even if the real D-Miss comes back, she still can't compare to her. She has the old lady and Master Ho's love. What do you have to compete with her? Hurry up and stop. Otherwise, your marriage will be even more hopeless." Yu Xiu slowly calmed down. Her face was expressionless, but her hatred for Yu Xiang deepened. Madame Chiu waited for a moment before letting go of her. She immediately tore off the handkerchief in her mouth and gave Madame Chiu a backhand slap. She scolded fiercely, "You traitor! I'll deal with you sooner or later." The Chiu clan had originally been sent by the Lin clan to spy on Yu Xiu, so they naturally knew about Yu Xiang's background. However, she was quick-witted. She felt that there was no future for her if she followed the Lin clan, so she quickly submitted to Yu Xiang. She covered her red and swollen face as she walked out of the room. When she saw Qingya tied up on the floor, she immediately kicked her to vent her anger. She thought to herself, "What do you mean by traitor? A fine bird should choose a tree to nest in. With Master Ho's love for Miss Xiang this prefecture Yu is still under Miss Xiang control. An idiot like you wants to surpass Miss Xiang in every way? Dream on." The author has something to say. "I have an appointment today. I'll probably be on the train when you see this chapter full of passion. I'll make up for it when I get back. Moi." The light was so dazzling that it attracted the attention of several dragon scale guards. They turned their heads to look and were stunned. Right at this moment, a shrill scream could be heard from the delivery room, followed by two loud and clear cries. There were people constantly shouting, "She's giving birth! She's giving birth!" Their voices were filled with tears of joy. The crown prince quickly walked to the door, only to see Song Mama holding a baby wrapped in a cloth in each hand. She cried and laughed as she shouted, "Congratulations, Your Highness! This is the little prince and this is the little princess. Please take a look. Her Highness the Crown Princess is safe. Please don't worry." She leaned over and revealed the two red little faces in her arms. The Crown Prince stretched out his hands, not knowing which one to hug first. The huge stone in his heart fell to the ground, making him feel dizzy. But at this moment, countless fragmented halos spread out, enveloping the entire Baiyun temple in colorful divine light. Several dragon scale guards pointed at the mountain peak surrounded by a circular rainbow and shouted, "The Tao light shines, auspicious signs descending from the heavens. This is the birth of the child of destiny." Everyone looked up and was mesmerized by this wonderful scene of nature. The words, "The Tao light shines," kept echoing in their minds. Song Mama recovered from her daze and hurriedly knelt down carefully with the children in her arms. She shouted, "Thank you, Tao Ancestor, for blessing Her Highness and the two imperial grandsons. Thank you, Tao Ancestor." When she said those words of encouragement to the Crown Princess, her heart was beating like a drum. Now that she saw this brilliant and dazzling Tao light, she was so excited that she almost cried. These two children were spiritual children bestowed by the Tao Ancestor. They would definitely be extraordinary in the future. The Crown Prince bent down to take the children and slowly walked out of the eaves, allowing them to be completely bathed in the Tao light. With the baptism of the divine light, all disasters would eventually be far away from them. The dragon scale guards knelt down one after another and shouted, "Congratulations, Crown Prince, auspicious signs descending from the heavens." The so-called Tao light was nothing more than a circular rainbow formed by the refraction and diffuse reflection of the clouds. But in the eyes of ignorant ancient people, it was undoubtedly a miracle. Inside the delivery room, the midwife opened the window a crack and helped the Crown Prince consort up so that she could admire this rare spectacle. She said softly, "Nyang nyang. The light of the Tao illuminates all evils and dispels them. It's hard to say how the mastermind is wringing his wrists and jumping about right now. You can sleep in peace. The crown princess smiled lightly and closed her eyes to sleep. Although her lower body was tearing apart, this was the first time she slept so soundly since she was pregnant. With the blessing of the Tao ancestor, she was finally safe. When the news reached the capital, the emperor was wild with joy and sent several urgent edicts for the crown prince to quickly send the crown princess and the 2 imperial grandsons back. The more happy he was, the more he hated the person behind the scenes. He secretly ordered Yu Pinyin to thoroughly investigate this matter. He would rather kill the wrong person than let it go. Yu Pinyin took the opportunity to report that Shan Miaoqi was suspected to be the blood of the Marquis household. The emperor did not take it seriously and said that once she was cleared of suspicion, she could be taken away, and he acted as if he did not know anything. Yu Pinyin gladly accepted the order. When the crown princess woke up, the ban on by Yun Guan had not been lifted and everyone was detained in the courtyard to be investigated. Because the emperor sent an urgent edict, the crown prince prepared a comfortable and warm carriage and ordered the coachman to slowly return to the capital. When the crown princess left, she did not forget to bring old matriarch Yu back and ordered Song Momo to personally send her to the entrance of the Marquis household. After 4 shurchen, 1 shurchen equals 2 hours, Song Momo was still very excited. She pulled old matriarch Yu's hand the whole way and described the scene of the bright light. She repeatedly sighed. Miss Xiang is indeed a spiritual person. There were so many lots, but she just had to draw the dragon and phoenix lots. Especially the last sentence of the lot, it was simply godly. If I did not see it with my own eyes, I would have thought that I was dreaming. It is a pity that Miss Xiang left first and did not see it. The 9th princess was stunned at that time and stood in the courtyard jumping and screaming. Old Lady Tai Tai excitedly discussed with her, and was also looking forward to seeing the miracle. It was a pity that she woke up late and only saw a bit of light that had not dissipated. Time passed quickly and they arrived at the Marquis household very quickly. Song Momo attentively helped old Lady Tai Tai into the house and had people carry several large boxes of expensive gifts, saying that Her Highness had brought them for Miss Xiang. The Pei clan also benefited from old Lady Tai Tai and took the last carriage to go down the mountain. Otherwise, they would have been frightened to death by a group of dragon scale guards covetously staring at them all day. The 2 of them said goodbye at the fork in the road. The Pei clan hurriedly returned to their rooms to wash up while old Lady Tai Tai went straight to the west wing to visit her granddaughter. Old ancestor, why are you back so early? Yu Xiang raised her head and mumbled sleepily. It was already 8:45 in the morning and she was still lying on the bed sleeping. She did not wear anything on her upper body except for a pair of smoky green bloomers. Part of the quilt was lifted, revealing half of her fair and tender jade-like arm. When the sunlight shone in from outside the window, it actually gave off a lustrous glow. It was really very seductive. Old Lady Tai Tai walked over and tucked her in, then tidied her unkempt hair and scolded, "Lazy girl, what time is it and you are still lying in bed? Quickly get up. You don't know, right? The crown princess gave birth prematurely." Yu Xiang was completely awake. She propped up her upper body and asked, "What did she give birth to? Is it a boy or a girl?" "She gave birth to a pair of twins. Her horoscope is really good. The heavens even sent down an auspicious sign." Old Lady Tai Tai told her the story she had heard from Nanny Song about the light of Tao shining on all things. She lovingly pinched the tip of her granddaughter's nose and smiled. "My granddaughter is really a little lucky star. Is your back done soaking? Let old ancestor take a look." Yu Xiang brushed her long hair aside and said, "It's much better after applying some medicine. Old ancestor, don't be happy yet. I want to tell you something depressing." Old Lady Tai Tai was smiling at first, but when she heard the last part, her face became so gloomy that it could drip water. Yu Xiang rubbed the corners of her eyes and complained in a sobbing voice, "The Fong clan humiliated me like this. Old ancestor, you have to help me." After she finished speaking, she blinked her cat eyes and tears streamed down her face. She looked very pitiful. Old Lady Tai Tai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She poked her forehead and said angrily, "Quickly put away the cat urine. Do you think I don't know your character? It's already good that you didn't scold that Fong clan boy until he wanted to die from shame and anger." Yu Xiang wiped away her tears and smiled shyly. If I don't scold him to death, how can I relieve the hatred in my heart? Old ancestor, you should quickly drive them away. Living in the Marquis household is annoying for no reason. Okay, old ancestor will send people to drive them away. Old lady Tai Tai rubbed the top of her granddaughter's head and sighed. Men are afraid of entering the wrong profession. Women are afraid of marrying the wrong man. The Pei clan married the wrong person after all. Those salt merchants stole the emperor's silver and lived more luxurious lives than the emperor. They even praised the salt administration officials until they didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. But they didn't know that the more wealthy they were, the closer they were to death. This time, the crown princess and the two little imperial grandsons were killed. The emperor's heart was filled with anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. They should be used to vent it. I also watched the Pei clan grow up in the past. When they were young, they still had some bearing. After soaking in that noisy and flashy place of Yangzhou for a few years, they were like vulgar merchant women who didn't have any knowledge. Old lady Tai Tai shook her head and sighed for a long time. Seeing that it was getting late, she repeatedly urged her granddaughter to get up. Then she returned to her room and ordered Mama to wake Yu Xiu. Yu Xiu trembled as she knelt down. Just as she was about to open her mouth to complain, she heard old lady Tai Tai ask in a deep voice, "How are you? Your wings have hardened. You even dare to do such a disgraceful thing as secretly meeting an outsider. You even brought him into your boudoir. Is the Fong clan so good that you didn't hesitate to lose your reputation to marry them?" Yu Xiu gritted her teeth and kowtowed. Granddaughter doesn't care whether the Fong clan is good or not. Granddaughter is only in love with Fong Gongzi. Since my reputation has been ruined, please grant me my wish, old ancestor. Yu Xiu had heard the Pei clan describe her family's situation before. Not only were the clothes and jewelry they wore priceless, even the food they ate was incomparably exquisite. A simple plate of egg-fried rice cost 50 taels of silver to make. The hens that laid eggs ate ginseng, astragalus root, atractylodes macrocephala, red dates and other ground powders every day. They were truly extremely wealthy. Moreover, Fang Zhichen was so talented and had a bright future. He was exactly the kind of man she had imagined countless times in her mind. If she missed out on the Fang clan, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to find a better place to go in the future. Old lady Tai Tai was so angry that she laughed and slowly said, "What do you mean by my reputation has been ruined? I'll deal with that Qingya later. The Qiu clan, Tao Hong and Lulu definitely won't spread this matter. How is your reputation ruined? It's you who doesn't want it anymore, right?" She fiercely threw the teacup in her hand and reprimanded, "How did my prefecture you give birth to such a shameless thing like you?" Yu Xiu's forehead was red and swollen, but she didn't show any remorse. She repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Please grant me my wish, please grant me my wish. Granddaughter doesn't have any other wishes. Please grant me my wish, old ancestor. I'll remember your kindness for the rest of my life." Old lady Tai Tai muttered to herself for a while, then coldly said, "Since you've already made up your mind, I have no choice but to grant you your wish. In a month, I'll personally visit the Pei clan to discuss the marriage. I don't need you to remember my kindness. I just hope that you won't go back on your words at the last minute. Granddaughter will never go back on her words." Yu Xiu couldn't wait to promise. Old lady Tai Tai stared at her for a while, then waved her hand to let her leave. Mama Ma asked worriedly the old lady, "Are you really going to marry eldest miss to the Fong clan? How can this be? Why can't it be? The young imperial grandson's death has caused the emperor to be furious. He'll definitely use thunderous methods to purge the Qing dynasty from inside and outside the court. In 3 months the dust will have settled on the salt tax case. The Fong clan won't be able to escape this calamity. Fang Zhichen's recent scholarly achievements will probably be used to atone for his crimes. He'll become a commoner and his official career will be ruined. I won't have to worry about the emperor suspecting my Marquis household. I can marry Yu Xiu over. Didn't she cry and beg for this? I'll grant her her wish." Mama Ma was speechless for a long time. She felt that eldest miss was hateful and pitiful at the same time. If she hadn't made such a fuss, she could have married into a well-off family and lived a stable life. If old lady Tai Tai really steeled her heart to marry her to the Fong clan, she would suffer in the future. Chang Yafu and her brother's marriage was probably not going to happen. My brother said that she can never step into the marquis household in this lifetime. How could that be? Yu was stunned. Older brother was already 20 years old. If he cancelled the engagement with Duke Jinggua's family, wouldn't that delay him for another 1 or 2 years? How could the old ancestor agree? Yu Xiang didn't say much. She waved her hand and ordered Tao Hong and Lulu to push her back. Yu cursed at her back before angrily leaving. As soon as she stepped into the small courtyard, she saw the Qiu clan's people escorting Qingye away. Qingye was beaten until she was on the verge of death and unconscious. She was half-dragged and half-dragged by 2 old women, one on the left and one on the right. The marriage was finally settled, so Yu didn't dare to complicate matters. She hurriedly dodged to the side and didn't dare to stop them. She waited until everyone had left before weakly returning to her room. She lay on the soft couch by the window and gasped for breath. From last night's despair to this morning's ecstasy, her emotions had fluctuated so much that she was extremely tired. Now that her worries had been resolved, she took a short nap. When she woke up, she was in the mood to think about other things. She called the Qiu clan's people into her room and asked, Yu Xiang said that the marriage between older brother and older sister full can't happen. Do you know about this? Of all the servants in the courtyard, only the Qiu clan's people were the most well-informed. Yu usually didn't need her, but she would always think of her at times like this. Although she wanted to drive this person away, she didn't have the ability to do so. Not to mention the Qiu clan's people, even the entire marquis household servants only listened to Yu Xiang's orders. Yu Xiang was very strict. She listed out all kinds of rules for the servants to memorize. The most important rule was that the servants were not allowed to bully their masters. Although she didn't like Yu, she had never mistreated her. She also didn't allow the servants to mistreat her. As a result, Yu's days could be considered comfortable. It was just that she wasn't satisfied. The Qiu clan's task was to keep an eye on Yu. They didn't want her to do anything stupid that would implicate the marquis household. At other times they had to serve her as they should. They didn't dare to violate Yu Xiang's taboo. As a result, she reported truthfully, "This servant knows a little about this matter. It should be true. Why? How could a good marriage be cancelled just like that? Older sister Full is already 19 this year. How can she live if the marriage is cancelled?" Yu suddenly felt that they were in the same boat. She asked for it. She actually instigated her younger brother to pour caterpillars on Miss Yang's head, causing Miss Yang to have blisters all over her body. At that time, Master Ho was so angry that he ordered the dragon scale guard to find a basket of snakes and pour it on her younger brother's body. It scared the hell out of him. Miss Yang coughed. Master Ho's heart ached. How could he allow an outsider to humiliate her? This Miss Chong hasn't even married into the family, yet she's already so arrogant. If she really marries into the family, won't she torture Miss Yang to death? Master Ho definitely won't agree to it. The Qiu clan shook their heads as they spoke. Chang Yafu was also a fool. He clearly knew that Miss Yang was Master Ho's treasure, yet he still went to provoke her. He had thrown away his good marriage for no reason. Yu was so jealous that she went crazy. She complained with a sobbing tone, "What's so good about that bastard? How can she compare to me? I'm Big Brother's biological sister. Why does he only dote on that bastard and not me? Old ancestor is also muddle-headed. He can't even differentiate between family and strangers." The Qiu clan saw that she was crying as she spoke and didn't have the patience to comfort her. They shook their heads and lifted the curtain to leave. They thought to themselves, all you think about is how to make trouble for Miss Yang and frame her. Although Miss Yang's mouth is vicious, when has she ever treated you unfairly? Whenever she says a word or two about revenge, I'm afraid you won't even be able to eat a full meal. One only knows how to play tricks and make trouble in the family. The other has already started helping the old lady manage the family at a young age, and helping Master Ho share his worries. Everyone can see who is good and who is bad. It's just that you don't know your own limits. Relationships between people are formed through time. If you don't treat others well, why should others treat you well? You see, you got what she wanted, but Feng Zhichen didn't sleep the whole night. When he saw that the Pei clan had returned, he urged her to pack her things and leave the Marquis household quickly. The Pei clan told him about the crown princess' premature birth and the auspicious signs from the heavens, but he didn't have the patience to listen. Son, why are you in such a hurry to leave? But what had happened? Look at your face, it's very bad. The Pei clan asked worriedly. Mother, don't ask anymore. We should leave quickly. Feng Zhichen didn't have the face to talk about what happened last night. He was so anxious that his eyes turned red. He had never been humiliated like this in his entire life. For a moment he felt like he had lost all hope. When he was still in Yangzhou, he attracted envious and respectful gazes wherever he went. Now that he was in the capital, he didn't even have the right to carry someone's shoes. In any case, he was the person who came in third place and was admired by countless noble ladies. Who did Yu Xiang think she was? She was just a useless person. When he thought about it deeply, his admiration for Yu Xiang turned into resentment. The Pei clan became more and more worried. They grabbed him and interrogated him until Feng Zhichen almost cried. Then he stuttered and told them about how he was caught by Yu Xiang in the middle of the night. The Pei clan became anxious and scolded, "Son, you're so muddle-headed. Why did you go just because she asked you to? Why don't you use your brain? This is the capital prefecture, you. It's not our old house. How can you go to a place like the backyard? What should we do now? I'm afraid that your marriage with the second daughter of the Yu family won't work out. No, I have to hurry and apologize to the old madam." As he spoke, he rummaged through the boxes for expensive gifts. So be it. I don't want to marry her either. Who can you marry now that you've ruined the reputation of the eldest daughter of the Yu family? You're in the wrong in this matter. You have to appease the old madam. Don't make enemies instead of marrying her. The Pei clan found a set of priceless jadeite head ornaments and wrapped it in a brocade box. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. I really don't dare to marry either of the two daughters of the Marquis family. Feng Zhichen couldn't suppress his grievances and complained, "Mother, the second daughter of the Yu family actually said that I'm not even worthy to carry her shoes. Mother, your son feels terrible." What? Did she really say that? Her son was the reverse scale of the Pei clan. She couldn't tolerate anyone saying anything bad about him. She immediately slammed the table and scolded, "What a little bitch. She really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She's just a useless person. If it weren't for..." What for? You eat from my Marquis family and live in my Marquis family. You even scold my Marquis family. My Marquis family can't afford to keep such a great Buddha like Madame Feng. Please leave quickly. Mama Ma came in with a few maidservants and said bluntly, "Please point out what belongs to you. The maidservants will help you pack it up and carry it out. The carriage is already parked outside the corner gate. Don't waste everyone's time." "No, I want to see the old madam." The Pei clan became anxious. A few days ago, they received a letter from Master Feng saying that he was going to marry the family Yu's daughter. It would be best if she was the daughter of the first wife. Everyone in the Great Han Dynasty knew that Yu Xiang risked her life to save her brother. Yu Pinyan's unprincipled love for her was no longer news. Marrying Yu Xiang was tantamount to grabbing Yu Pinyan's weak spot. What kind of person was Yu Pinyan? Those who were ordered to kill were all commanders. Their power was above the three departments and they only listened to the emperor's orders. With his help it was like growing a few more heads. Not to mention that Yu Xiang couldn't walk. Even if her entire body was paralyzed, they would still carry her through the door. The Pei clan knew that if they didn't complete their husband's task this time, they would definitely be punished when they returned. They pushed Mama Ma and the maidservants aside and were about to rush to the main courtyard. When Yu Pinyan came back from court, he saw a group of people surrounding a pile of boxes and baskets. Mama Ma pulled the Pei clan members by their sleeves and pushed them towards the corner gate. Feng Zhichen stood at the side awkwardly with dark circles under his eyes. What's going on? Yu Pinyan looked at the gatekeeper. Yu Xiang had covered up the scandal of the night party in the boudoir. so the gatekeeper naturally had no way of knowing. He shook his head and said, "Master Ho, this servant doesn't know. They must have offended the old lady." Upinion nodded and turned to walk towards the west wing. However, he heard the Pei clan members shout loudly, "My son went to second Mrs. Boudoir last night to have a private meeting with her. You won't let me see old madam, so I'll spread this scandal. Let's see who's the shameless one. Didn't you Xiang say that my son wasn't even fit to carry her shoes? Then I'll ruin her reputation and see who dares to marry her. At that time old madam will come crying and begging me." Upinion stopped and turned to walk towards them. He used his thumb to push open the scabbard of the embroidered spring saber in his hand. The saber flashed with a cold light and emitted a buzzing sound. The buzzing sound was very subtle, but to everyone's ears it was like a thunderclap. It was deafening. Not to mention, the gloomy and cold murderous intent that permeated his body froze the surrounding air. Chapter 41. What did your son do last night? Say it again. He said each word slowly, his thumb gently stroking the scabbard. His movements looked extremely gentle, but they contained a chilling murderous intent. The Pei clan members' tongues seemed to have been cut off. They opened and closed their mouths but no sound came out. Upinion turned to look at Fang Jichen. His gaze wandered over the bulging veins on his neck. His gaze was like an invisible blade, slowly and cruelly cutting through his flesh. It was as if his head would fall to the ground and his blood would splatter everywhere if he dared to answer yes. Fang Jichen instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He covered his neck and stammered, I went to the first Mrs. room last night, not the second Mrs. room. My mother said that was nonsense. It was the first miss who begged me again and again that I reluctantly went. Commandant you, please spare my life for the sake of my grandmother." His legs trembled and he could not stand straight. He almost knelt down. Upinion glanced at Mama Ma. Mama Ma nodded slightly, indicating that he was telling the truth. You see, you have been stupid for a long time. She never knew who she should befriend and who she should not befriend. Even now she was confused about who she should marry and who she should not marry. Upinion did not have the leisure to care about her. He sheathed his sword, turned around and strode away. As for the malicious slander from the Pei clan, he would make it up to old Master Fang. The thick murderous intent that filled the air slowly dissipated with his footsteps. The Pei clan mother and son breathed heavily, looking as if they had just survived a disaster. "Madam Fang, young Master Fang, please. The carriage has been waiting outside for a long time." Mama Ma pushed the two of them and said sarcastically, "Oh, you still don't want to leave? Shall I call Master Ho to send you off?" The Pei clan mother and son turned pale with fright. They hurriedly supported each other and walked towards the Jiaoman. Mama Ma said to the two of them, "Don't spread any rumors to harm the reputation of our prefecture. You should know what our Master Ho does. The dragon scale guard's eyes and ears are everywhere. If you say anything unpleasant, be careful of your tongues being cut off." The Pei clan mother and son walked faster, as if there were evil spirits chasing after them. Mama Ma spat and then went back to report. As a large number of blisters had risen on her back, she felt an unbearable itch when she rubbed against the cloth. Therefore, she ordered her men to set the floor heater on fire, and when the temperature in the room rose, she took off her outer shirt, wearing only a pink doo-doo and a pair of loose, smoky green bloomers which nearly reached her waist. Lazily, she lay on her stomach on the soft couch, counting a box of small golden pigs. She didn't wear her hair in a bun. Her long shiny black hair was like the most gorgeous satin, covering the entire bed. There were even a few strands that wrapped around her slender arms, making her black hair appear even darker and her snow-white skin appear even whiter. The strong color difference made people dizzy. Lulu held a box of ointment in his hands. He secretly swallowed his saliva as he gently applied it to the affected area. He tried to resist, but in the end he could not resist. He reached out and slid his hands down his master's waist to pull up the bloomers that were slightly revealing half of his master's cleavage. But at this moment, the curtains were lifted and Master Ho's tall figure blocked all the sunlight. The light in the room immediately dimmed. Lulu was startled. He hurriedly picked up the mermaid gauze robe that was carelessly thrown on the soft couch and covered his master's back. He immediately bowed and said hesitantly, "Master Ho, it's time to change Mrs. Dressing. So, shouldn't you leave us for a while?" The thin layer of mermaid gauze did not cover anything. Instead, it made her white and tender body look faintly discernible. It was very seductive. Yu Pinyan's eyes darkened. He took the ointment from Lulu's hands and ordered, "You leave." Lulu was dumbfounded. Why was he the one who should leave? "Go out. Big brother will help me apply the ointment." Yu Xiang waved his hand heartlessly. Lulu walked out in a daze. He stood in the corridor for a long time before coming back to his senses. He saw Tao Hong bouncing over with Alu on his shoulder. He angrily scolded in a low voice, "You damn girl, taking Alu out to play again. How many times have I told you to tie Alu to Mrs. Door so that Master Ho can hear the noise when he comes? You just won't listen. If Master Ho wants to come, then let him come. Why would he want to hear the noise?" Tao Hong's face was full of confusion. Alu also chirped, "Master Ho is here." Lulu looked at this silly person and silly bird. He waved his hand weakly. "Forget it. It's hard to explain it to you." In the room, Yu Pinyan sat on the edge of the bed. He lifted his robe and asked, "Are you feeling better today? Is it still itchy?" "It's much better than yesterday." Yu Xiang was playing with a small golden pig in her hand. Yu Pinyan nodded. He dipped a little ointment and applied it evenly to the still somewhat red and swollen area. After applying the ointment, his fingertips were still reluctant to leave. They slid towards the slightly sunken tailbone. Seeing the small waist and perfectly round and perky buttocks, his eyes became darker and darker. However, he heard Yu Xiang chuckle. She glanced at him with her watery cat eyes. "Big brother, it's so itchy." It was only then that Yu Pinyan came back to his senses. He realized that his fingertips had already left the wound. They stopped at her sunken waist and circled gently. The falling bloomers could not cover the faintly discernible cleavage. It made his eyes burn with passion. He withdrew his hand as if he had been scalded. He couldn't get rid of the slippery feeling that remained on his fingertips. He didn't dare to think or look. He put down the ointment, found an opaque brocade robe from the box, and covered his sister's body. After doing all this, he felt as if he had fought the most difficult battle. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his breathing was much heavier. Yu Xiang was a heartless person. When she was with her brother, she never thought about the difference between men and women. She pointed at the sweat on his forehead and laughed. "The house is burning, and the sun is shining outside. Big brother, take off your coat. Look at how hot you are." Yu Pinyan's body wasn't hot, but his heart was. He could only smile bitterly when he heard this. However, he obeyed and took off his outer robe and court boots. He found a historical record and sat cross-legged on the couch. He sat beside his sister and slowly read. A calm heart naturally cooled down. Reading for a while might make him feel better. If he was asked to leave, he would rather stay and suffer in pain and happiness. Yu Xiang had long been accustomed to her brother reading by her side. She continued to count her little golden pigs. She looked at her brother when she counted one, then looked at him again when she counted one. She seemed to want to say something but then hesitated. Yu Pinyan felt as if a goose feather had brushed past his heart when he was stared at by that pair of bright and spirited cat eyes. He endured for a moment before he calmly said, "If you have something to say, say it. Why do you keep looking at me?" He turned his head and saw his sister propped up her upper body. The collar of her bodice drooped down, revealing a seductive cleavage. With just a glance he could imagine how soft it would feel. He immediately retracted his gaze and stared at the words on the page. His brain couldn't recognize them anymore. He secretly took a deep breath. Yu Xiang didn't notice. She stammered, "Big brother, I want to buy a house in the countryside." "If you want to buy it in the capital." "What good houses are there in the countryside?" "They're all fields or brick houses." Yu Pinyan turned a page. His voice was a bit hoarse. "It's better to buy it in the countryside. If sister-in-law dislikes me in the future, I can stay away. You see, you said I'm a good-for-nothing." If you protect me now, who knows how you'll think I'm a hindrance when you have a wife and children in the future. Yu Xiang became more and more upset as she spoke. She even began to cry. She hurriedly raised her hand to wipe it away. Yu Pinyin didn't look at her. He stared at the page and said coldly, "Don't listen to her nonsense." It seemed that he should marry you, see you off as soon as possible. Yu Xiang bit her lip. Her expression was still very uneasy. Yu Pinyin was helpless. He quickly glanced at her and comforted her. "Okay, buy a house in the countryside. If she dislikes you, then let her move out." Yu Xiang nodded. Only then did she pick up the little golden pigs that were strewn all over the place and put them into a box. She couldn't feel happy when she thought about how her brother would marry another woman, and how she would no longer have any room to interfere in his life. After hesitating for a while, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She said hesitantly, "Brother, don't get married, okay? I don't like sister-in-law. I don't like anyone who becomes my sister-in-law. It'll be great if you're my only sister-in-law." Yu Pinyin's heart trembled violently. An indescribable joy flowed out from his cold and hard heart that had long since cracked. The corners of his lips lifted slightly, but his eyes were fixed on the book. He pretended to be indifferent as he replied, "Okay, brother won't get married. Brother will only live by Xianger." Even though she knew that it was impossible for him not to get married, Yu Xiang was already very satisfied to hear this sentence. She covered her mouth. She was overjoyed like a mouse that had stolen oil. Yu Pinyin quickly glanced at her. The smile on his lips deepened. Once Yu Xiang's worries were gone, she had the desire to talk. She recounted everything that had happened last night. She spoke very slowly, and her expressions were lively. She even gestured as she spoke, and it was very interesting to listen to. One of Yu Pinyin's favorite things was to return home every day and listen to his little sister narrate the day's events to him. Even though it was all trivial, it made him chuckle repeatedly. He was in a very good mood. When he entered the Dragonscale Guard, he was a heartless and ruthless killing machine. When he returned home and listened to his little sister's nagging, he felt that he was a living person with flesh and blood. He simply threw the book aside and lay on his side beside his little sister. He pretended to casually wrap her in a brocade robe. Then, he wrapped his arm around her neck and half pulled her into his embrace. His large palm tightly clasped her small hand. Their 10 fingers intertwined as he listened to her vivid description. There was no trace of coldness or cruelty between his brows. Only gentleness was left. When he heard Fang Zhichen's confession, a trace of hostility flowed out of his eyes. He coldly said, "He really dared to dream." Yu Xiang snuggled into his embrace and said aggrievedly, "Of course he dared to dream. He just saw that I was a cripple and didn't take me seriously. It's not just him. Who doesn't want brother's power when they marry me in the future? When they propose marriage, they make it sound so good. After I marry into their family, they won't treat me as a human. They might even order their concubines and maidservants to climb over my head and abuse me." Chapter 42. In the study, 2 Dragonscale guards stood solemnly and knelt down to greet the leader. They then presented a file that recorded all of Shun Miaoqi's experiences from birth till now. Yu Pinyin took it and looked at it expressionlessly. To be able to fall from a wealthy merchant's daughter to a servant, he had already guessed that the family Shen had met with a great calamity but did not expect that he was the one who pushed the blame. It turned out that the family Shen was considered a wealthy family in Lingnan, and the history of Father Shen's rise was quite legendary. He was originally an expert in grave robbing and excavating gold, and used the antique business to cover up his shady side business. Later on, Furan Shen gave birth to a son and a daughter. In order to accumulate good fortune for his children, he no longer did the wicked thing of digging up ancestral graves. Before Shun Miaoqi was 10 years old, her life was smooth sailing and she lived a life of luxury. When she was 10 years old, she followed Father Shen to Luoyang to deal with antiques and coincidentally met the crown prince who was recuperating at the relay station. Shun Miaoqi's offering of medicinal herbs was not successful and she was caught as a spy. Father Shen used 70 to 80% of his wealth to redeem her, and the family fled back to Lingnan. At that time, the one who ordered the arrest was Yu Pinyin himself. From then on, the Shen family started to decline. It was no wonder that Shen Miaoqi still remembered him after 4 years. When they met, she would shout out hatred, revenge, and other words. She was afraid that she would place all the blame on him and would remember and curse him every day and night. Thinking of this, Yu Pinyin sneered and continued to read. After returning to Lingnan, the family Shen gradually could not make ends meet. In order to not let his children suffer, Father Shen had no choice but to return to his old business. Just at this time, an old customer came to the door and asked him to go to an ancient tomb to steal a gilded Mother Buddha statue buried in the main cave and paid half of the deposit. Because the reward was very generous, it was just enough to save the family Shen, who was unable to recover. Father Shen was immediately moved, and after consulting many documents, he was sure that there was a Buddha statue in the tomb and rushed over that night. After a narrow escape, Father Shen brought the Buddha statue home and was unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. But in these 3 days, Shen Miaoqi opened the box containing the Buddha statue out of curiosity and accidentally broke one of the Buddha's hands. Because she often saw Father Shen repairing antiques, she unexpectedly learned how to use transparent glue to glue the Buddha's hand back and put it back into the box. After Father Shen woke up, he quickly informed that person to come and get the goods. The two of them were so excited that they didn't inspect the items properly before completing the transaction. After the man returned home and carefully examined the statue, he discovered that he had been fooled. Because he had yearned for this Buddha statue for a long time, he hated the Shen family's father, who had ruined his treasure and cheated him of his money. He set up a series of traps, causing the Shen family's family to be ruined and the Shen family to be imprisoned. The last 10% of the family property was used to atone for his crimes. Shen Fu cried out that he had been wrongly accused and died in front of the prison door. Shen Fu also fell ill and could not recover. As for the family Shen, those concubines had long stolen the family property and ran away with their concubine children. Shen Miaoqi also had a older brother named Shen Yuanqi. Since then, he shouldered the entire family's livelihood and signed a death contract with a local large family to become a servant. He used the money from selling himself to rent a small house for Mother Shen and his younger sister to live in. Mother Shen's illness was critical, and at the time when she needed someone to take care of her the most, Shen Miaoqi stole the remaining 10 taels of silver and ran away. When she went out, she only took a few clothes and a piece of swaddling cloth. It could be assumed that Mother Shen could not endure the guilt in her heart and told her about her past, but in exchange, she was so heartless and resolute in her treatment. Mother Shen could not find the person and could not find the money, so she vomited a few mouthfuls of blood and passed away in a few days. The family Shen brother and sister went their separate ways from then on. Shen Miaoqi walked towards the capital with her head buried and met a caravan on the way. She spent 2 taels of silver to ride their carriage but did not expect to be robbed by bandits. The people in the caravan were either dead or injured. Shen Miaoqi hid under the carriage and was about to meet with disaster when she was saved by Zhao and Shen's family, who was reporting to the capital. She willingly sold herself to the young miss of the Zhao family as a slave with the idea of going to the capital together. She originally thought that she could finally sit back and relax, but did not expect that Zhao and Shen would offend the higher-ups because he was too upright, and the promotion that he worked hard for 8 years was awarded to another colleague. Zhao and Shen, who received the letter from the higher-ups, could only turn back halfway and continue to be the magistrate of Yunzhou. Shen Miaoqi not only did not go near the capital but went further and further away. At this time, she was already scared witless by the bandits and did not dare to go on the road alone. She could only stay in the Zhao family and wait for an opportunity. This wait lasted for 4 years. She had snatched away her noble identity and enjoyed the glory and wealth that should have belonged to her. And she suffered for her for 14 years and still did not get any pity from her elder brother. Why did the heavens not open their eyes? Thinking of this, her chest surged with strong unwillingness and resentment. The author has something to say. I am going home after eating and drinking my fill. Thank you to my cute little things and also thank all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Chapter 43. After settling down Shun Miaoqi, Yu Pinyin headed directly to the Shui residence. This Shui family was a prominent family in Lingnan and had some foundation in the court. However, their descendants were getting worse with each generation and were about to die. But Master Shui was a visionary. Seeing that Shin Yuanqi was extremely intelligent and had an extraordinary mind, he had the thought of loving him and took him as an adopted son. Shin Yuanqi also knew how to repay kindness. After becoming the top scorer, he brought Master Shui's family to the capital and treated them like his own parents. His relationship with the Shui family's eldest son was also very harmonious. Yu Pinyin had received the title of Jade Face King of Hell in his early years. In recent years, as his methods grew, the two words Jade Face were removed and he was directly called Living King of Hell. As the number of lives in his hands increased, the sinister aura around him became heavier and heavier. No matter how handsome he was, it would only make people terrified. Seeing him holding the embroidered spring saber, Master Shui was so scared that his legs trembled and he was drenched in cold sweat. He could not even speak clearly. After stammering for half a day, it was Shin Yuanqi who hurried over to help him out. This official greets Commandant Yu. Shin Yuanqi bowed with his hands clasped in front. His attitude was neither servile nor overbearing and was not alarmed or fearful. Yu Pinyin did not reply and his sharp gaze wandered around his face. This was an extremely handsome face. Other than the long and narrow phoenix eyes, the other parts were at least 50 to 60% similar to Xiang. Just by looking at this face, one could not deny the blood relationship between him and Xiang. Yu Pinyin's originally unhappy mood became even more gloomy as he used his thumb to push away the embroidered spring saber. The buzzing sound of the saber blade rubbing against the scabbard echoed in the hall. Not only was it sharp and ear-piercing, it also carried a trace of murderous aura. It scared Master Shui's family so much that their souls almost left their bodies. Shin Yuanqi heard the sound of his adopted brother's teeth chattering, and his calm face showed a bit of helplessness. He extended his hand and invited, "May I ask Commandant Yu to step aside to speak?" Yu Pinyin slowly put the knife back and left with him without saying a word. Everyone in the Shui family let out a long sigh of relief, feeling as if they had been rescued from a hopeless situation. "Commandant Yu, please have some tea." Personally pouring a cup of hot tea for the imposing youth, Shen Yuanqi went straight to the point and said, "Since the domain chief is here, he must have investigated my background. That Shan Miaoqi must have been released from prison? He's really lucky." He sneered. There was no trace of worry on his face, only endless resentment. Yu Pinyin looked up and said indifferently, "I remember that she's your little sister." Shen Yuanqi shook his head. "This official remembers that you are her biological brother." After saying that, he couldn't help but laugh. To the cold-blooded Yu Pinyin, what did blood mean? If he wanted to find Shin Miaoqi with the dragon scale guard in his hands, it would only take 3 to 4 days. However, he had searched for 4 whole years. It was enough to show that he did not care about Shin Miaoqi's life or death. If not for Xiang, saving his life that year, how could he have such peaceful days today? Yu Pinyin had always been someone who did not recognize his own family. Seeing the youth's cold eyes sweep over, Shen Yuanqi quickly stopped laughing and slowly said, "Domain Chief Darren does not need to use words to test me. I will tell Darren the truth. The current me and Shen Miaoqi do not have half a bit of friendship, only hatred. She caused the family Shen to collapse and I only resent her. However, she should not have stolen Mother's life-saving money and ran away. Mother stayed in bed for 3 days before she passed away with hatred. I tried to close her eyes several times but was unable to. She really died with grievances. You did not know that on the day she left, Mother had already passed me a message, asking me to ask for leave from Godfather and bring her to the capital to look for relatives. She said that it was to compensate her for the suffering she had suffered all these years." Suffering? When had she ever suffered any bit of suffering in my family? Speaking till here, Shen Yuanqi poured away the hot tea and replaced it with a cup of strong wine. He sneered and said, "If I had known earlier, I would have sent her back even if I had to risk my life. It was also because father made a mistake and was afraid of your family's revenge, so he hid his tracks and fled back to Lingnan. Us merchants originally had low status, and how could we afford to offend the nobles? If we were to let you find her, perhaps our entire family would lose their lives. Who would have thought that even if we did not let you find her, our family would still be ruined by her? Could this be retribution? Shen Yuanqi continuously drank 2 cups of strong wine and shook his head with a bitter smile. Domain Chief Darren does not know. Our family Shen is not completely without conscience. We knew that she was of noble birth and thus did not dare to neglect her. Since young, everything she ate and wore was the best. We also asked a teacher to carefully guide her, and molded her in the direction of a noble lady. In terms of status, even her father had to lower his head in front of her. Now that I think about it, it was because of our indulgence that she was raised to have a heart higher than the sky and thus planted the root of the disaster early. Holding the empty wine cup in silence for a long time, Shen Yuanqi then recovered his calm and cupped his hands. This official forgot himself and caused Domain Chief Darren to laugh at me. Hearing that Shen Miaoqi had fallen into Darren's hands, this official thought that this day would come sooner or later. This official only wants to ask Darren one thing. What do you want to do with Xiang'er? As for this official, I asked Domain Chief Darren to be magnanimous and let this official off on the account that my family Shen has already been ruined. He was not someone who was greedy for life and afraid of death. However, Shen Miaoqi had returned and his younger sister's future was uncertain. He was really not at ease to die like this. Yu Pinyin glanced at him and said in an unkind tone, Ben Ho is not interested in taking your life. Moreover, Xiang'er is not someone you can call. He originally wanted to kill this person to cover up the past but changed his mind at the last moment. This person may still be of some use to him. Shen Yuanqi stared blankly and then nodded with a bitter smile. It is this official who has overstepped. How does Darren intend to settle Shen Miaoqi, and how to deal with my younger sister? Yu Pinyin also poured away the tea and replaced it with a cup of strong wine. He drank it in one gulp and coldly said, Xiang'er is Ben Ho's younger sister. Saying that Xiang'er was not allowed and saying that her younger sister was not allowed, Commandant Yu's character was indeed as tyrannical and overbearing as the rumors. Shen Yuanqi thought for a moment and straightforwardly expressed his attitude. No matter how much power Darren has, he is unable to erase this official's blood relationship with Xiang and Second Young Mississippi. Now that Shen Miaoqi has been found by Darren, shouldn't Second Young Miss also be brought back to the family by this official? It is time for everyone to return to their respective places, but not now. When he said this, Yu Pinyin's expression was particularly gloomy. Shen Yuanqi's chest surged with anger but also faintly felt joy. The anger was because Family Yu had abandoned his younger sister, and the joy was because he was able to reunite with his only family member. He took a few deep breaths to control his expression and asked, When is that? Yu Pinyin did not answer and put down the wine cup. Ben Ho came here to warn you. Without Ben Ho's permission, do not attempt to acknowledge Xiang'er, and you are not allowed to have any contact with her. If you do not know what is good for you, Ben Ho has thousands of ways to make you and the Shui family completely disappear. When the time is right, Ben Ho will naturally send someone to inform you. Facing the famous king of hell who killed people like scything flax, Shen Yuanqi could only nod with a bitter smile. Moreover, if he rashly went to acknowledge Xiang'er, she would definitely not be willing to leave with him. In her heart, Prefecture Yu was her real family, and Yu Pinyin was her biological older brother. And the one who took her away would become her enemy. He could not help but worry about this point. After Yu Pinyin returned to the Fu, he went directly to the main courtyard. Matriarch was currently dozing off on the couch. When she heard the sound of the curtain being lifted and Mama Ma paying her respects, Matriarch opened her eyes and smiled. Yandere, you're back. Come sit with old ancestor for a while. Yu Pinyin walked over to pour a cup of hot tea for Matriarch and said faintly, Old ancestor, the person the Lin clan is looking for has been found a few days ago. At some point in time, Yu Pinyin no longer called the Lin clan his mother. Matriarch could tell that something was wrong, but there was nothing she could do. She could only frown slightly and ponder for a long time before she realized who the person the Lin clan was looking for was. She immediately sat up straight and asked anxiously, "You really found her? Where is she?" After searching for 4 years, Matriarch finally received definite news. She could not help but reveal an expression of ecstasy. In the end, this was her blood-related granddaughter. In the dead of night, she could not help but think of her. She would toss and turn restlessly in bed, her thoughts burning with worry. If her granddaughter did not live a good life and died outside, Matriarch would not have the face to see the family use ancestors even in the Yellow Springs. Upinion patted Matriarch's shoulder and said indifferently, "Old ancestor, do you still remember the servant girl who added charcoal and caused the crown princess to give birth prematurely? She is the person the Lin clan is looking for. It's her." Matriarch's joyful expression immediately faded and was replaced by fear and unease. "Old ancestor, do not worry. She has already been cleared of suspicion and has been sent to Shueihua Nunnery by me. She is the servant girl of the eldest legitimate daughter of Yunzhou's prefectural magistrate, Zhao Anshuan. Once I've taken care of the Zhao clan, old ancestor will send someone to pick her up." How did she become the Zhao clan's servant girl? Matriarch's fear was mixed with a bit of astonishment. "I have a file with me. Old ancestor will understand once you finish reading it. Grandson still has to investigate the case, so I'll be going now." Upinion asked the imperial bodyguard to bring the file over and then left. When he reached the door, he seemed to think of something. He turned around and cautiously said, "Xiang'er still has an older brother who is currently in the capital. Grandson has already warned that person. He definitely won't dare to come to our door to look for her. In the future, grandmother will send people to watch Xiang'er. Don't let her meet that person." Although the old lady didn't understand, she also felt that what he said was right. Xiang'er couldn't be given to other families, so she agreed without hesitation. When the guard brought the file, she couldn't wait to read it. Mama Ma also leaned over to take a look. Her eyes were as wide as copper bells, and she kept chanting Buddhist scriptures. After reading it, the two of them sighed at the same time. This is really a sin. She already knew that her granddaughter was a jinx, but she didn't expect her fate to be so bad. The first time she jinxed her family shun, the second time she jinxed her family shun, the third time she jinxed her father's death, the fourth time she jinxed her mother's death, and the fifth time she jinxed Shen Yuanqi to become a slave, his future ruined. The caravan that met her was robbed by bandits, killed and scattered. Zhao Anshuan, who met her, had his promotion opportunity snatched away in the blink of an eye. The crown princess, who met her, was immediately born prematurely and narrowly escaped death. Wherever she went, she jinxed everything. She could be called a mobile source of disaster. What was even more frightening was that she and Upinion had only met twice, and both times she was involved in the disaster of being sentenced to prison. The first time was fine, but the second time was extremely dangerous. If something happened to the crown princess and the little imperial grandson, she would shout out her identity in prison, and her family you would also be finished. The old lady leaned on the couch and rubbed her temples. In her mind, she kept recalling Master Kuhai's judgment. Everything really came true. Siblings can't coexist when they fight. This jinx really did come to fight with Yandere for fate. She narrowly avoided it this time, but what about the next time? What about the time after that? Fate was somewhat illusory, and she could temporarily ignore it. But more importantly, her granddaughter's character didn't seem good. She abandoned her mother, whom she had raised for 14 years, and even took away her mother's life-saving money. The kindness of raising her was greater than the kindness of giving birth to her. No matter what the family Shin did wrong, they still raised her. She lived a life of luxury, had a group of servants, and didn't lack anything. Even when the family went bankrupt, she didn't lose out at all. Instead, she let her own son sell himself as a slave to continue providing for her, and even risked his life to send her home. Her actions this time could even be said to be cruel and unscrupulous. If such a person were to be brought home, who knew how much trouble it would cause? The old lady fiercely massaged her temples and fell into an unprecedented struggle. The author has something to say. I heard that if you buy it on a computer or phone, the author gets a different cut. If you buy it on a computer, you get 20% more. I'm handing over the house at the end of the year, and there's still a few decades of mortgage to pay. Adai, who is so short of money that he's going crazy, begs all of you to give me 20% more if it's convenient. Of course, everything is still based on your convenience _. Also, I want to thank my cute little creatures and all of my friends who supported the original version. Mwax. Chapter 44. Just as the matriarch was feeling a severe headache, Wancho lifted the curtain and anxiously shouted, "The old lady, bad news. Madam committed suicide by drowning herself. You should go and take a look." What? Suicide by drowning herself? Is she dead? The matriarch jumped in fright and almost rolled off the bed. Fortunately, Mama Kim found her early and saved her in time. She's still unconscious and talking nonsense. Wancho squatted down and helped the matriarch put on her shoes. The matriarch didn't wait for him to finish putting on her shoes before leaving. She thought angrily, "One caused a huge disaster outside and almost caused my marquee household to be confiscated and stripped of my title. The other committed suicide at home and almost caused Yandere's reputation to fall to the ground. This mother and daughter pair really came to collect debts." Yu Xiang arrived at the main room a step ahead of them. Although she had no feelings for the Lin clan, she was still the daughter of the Lin clan in name. Moreover, she was in charge of the entire prefecture Yu. She couldn't pretend that she didn't hear the news when the servants reported it, so she had no choice but to make this trip. The Lin clan member was lying on the bed on the verge of death. The bruises on her face hadn't subsided, and the red bruise on her neck was very shocking. Her eyes were tightly shut, and she was shaking her head while talking nonsense. Yu Xiang tilted her head and listened. She was saying, "Daughter, where are you, daughter?" Yu Xiang didn't treat herself as an outsider. Moreover, she still didn't know that she wasn't of prefecture Yu blood. Thus, she ordered the servants to call a doctor as she sneered with a heart as dead as ashes. "I'm clearly right by your side. Why do you keep calling me your daughter? You even committed suicide because of this? You don't want me to have a good time even if you die, right? If you really love me and care about me, why don't you turn around and look at me? You usually treat me like I don't exist, so why do you keep calling me when you're unconscious? What are you thinking? Why don't you tell me clearly?" She naturally knew which daughter the Lin clan was calling, but that didn't stop her from being angry at the Lin clan's actions. She died and everything would be over. She left behind such a mess, yet her brother had to clean it up. If one or two unpleasant rumors leaked out, who knew how many people would stab her brother with a knife? Thinking of this, she couldn't restrain her anger. She used her horsewhip to hit the bedding beside the Lin clan's bedding, and the muffled sounds of slapping echoed in the room. Nanny Jean was Mrs. Lin's escort. She was afraid that she would really hit her master, so she hurriedly ran over to stop her. "Second miss, Madam is your mother. It's fine if you don't feel sorry for her, but why are you blaming her?" She knew about Yu Xiang's family background. Therefore, her tone was filled with disdain and contempt, without the slightest bit of respect. "I'm the master and you're the servant. You're talking about treason with me? I want to teach you what it means to respect your superiors." Yu Xiang pushed her away and angrily shouted at the unconscious Lin clan, "Even if you want to die, don't choose such an undignified way to die. Do you know how many people are watching the Marquis household now? Do you know how well my brother looks on the surface but how difficult it is behind the scenes? It's fine if you die, but if people seize the opportunity to attack my brother, then his career will be ruined. He only got to where he is today by risking his life. Every step he takes is bleeding. Do you think it's easy for him? Even if you don't love him, don't always add to his troubles, okay? I'm begging you. My brother doesn't owe you anything. On the contrary, it's you who haven't fulfilled your responsibility as a mother. If you still have a little bit of conscience, I'm begging you to live peacefully, okay? I'm begging you, okay?" The more she spoke, the more agitated and angry she became. She continued to whip the Lin clan's bedding with her horsewhip until the silk bedsheets were torn apart. They were all commanders. Since ancient times, how many people who occupied this position had a good ending? That position was like a murderous knife in the emperor's hand. Once it was blunted, it would be ruthlessly abandoned. She lived every day in fear and trepidation. No matter what she said or did, She would always think and calculate, for fear that the prefecture you would make a mistake and bring disaster to her brother. However, these two people were all blockheads. They were only afraid that her brother wouldn't die quickly enough. When the matriarch arrived, she saw Yupinian standing at the door and listening attentively. He must have received the news before he could leave and hurried over. She slowly walked over and happened to hear Yuxiang's heart-wrenching complaints. Her heart trembled along with it. In the entire Fu, Xianger was the one who understood the situation the most. Her brother protected her like the apple of his eye. This affection was not in vain. She also treated her brother as her lifeblood. Whatever she did, she always put her brother first and did not consider for herself at all. The matriarch's anxious heart finally received a bit of comfort. She turned her face to look at her grandson. Sure enough, she found a trace of tenderness in his eyes. Inside the room, Mama Kim did not dare to approach. She could only kneel down and kowtow to Yuxiang. Second, young miss, foreign is already like this. Please be merciful and let her go. This old woman also begs you to let go of my prefecture. You don't torment her anymore, okay? The matriarch used her walking stick to enter the room and walked to the bedside to feel the pulse of the Lin clan. She heaved a sigh of relief. It's good that she didn't die. Yupinian took the horsewhip from his younger sister's hand and stroked her slightly red eyes. He comforted Xianger, don't be angry. There is no need to bicker with her. What was Shan Miaoqi? What was the Lin clan? This was his true family. A family that wholeheartedly thought of him. Yuxiang threw herself into his arms and sobbed, older brother, I just feel sorry for you. If she really died, I don't know how many people will poke at your spine. If this reaches the emperor's ears. She simply did not dare to think too deeply. Don't look at how older brother wanted to be awe-inspiring, and no one dared to provoke him. That was because he handled things flawlessly. If there was a day where there was a mistake, based on the many political enemies under him, they would group together and attack him. If the emperor was also dissatisfied with older brother's situation would be dangerous. One must know that the Lin clan was not like those uncles who were unjust and killed. The Lin clan was older brother's birth mother. If she hanged herself and someone with ulterior motives made up a few words, wouldn't older brother end up with the infamy of forcing birth mother to death? Worse than a beast? This was more serious than not recognizing his own family. The emperor dared to use older brother because he valued his impartial and ruthless methods. But if older brother really did not recognize his own birth mother, would the emperor be at ease? Her heart became more and more unsettled. After being pulled into Yupinian's arms, she couldn't help but cling tightly to him. She buried her face in the hollow of his neck and continuously inhaled the sandalwood scent that made her feel even more at ease. Only then did she feel a little better. The scorching hot air caused goosebumps to appear all over his skin. Yupinian didn't show it on his face, but he couldn't help but tighten his arms around his younger sister. He tilted his head slightly and used his lips to rub the top of her fragrant hair. Amidst the intense emotions churning in his chest, there was not a trace of worry for the Lin clan. There was only endless joy. It was enough that there was someone in this world who treated him as her life. He didn't have any other extravagant requests. Seeing that the Lin clan was about to wake up, the matriarch had many things to say to her, but it wasn't convenient for her granddaughter to hear. She waved her hand at her grandson and said, Yenner, send your younger sister back. Because all of her attention was on the Lin clan, she didn't notice the strong emotions in her grandson's eyes. Yupinian agreed in a hoarse voice. He patted his younger sister's back and carried her out. Once the two of them were far away, the matriarch picked up a cup of cold tea from the table and directly splashed it on the Lin clan's face. She loudly shouted, Lin clan, get up! The Lin clan was already about to wake up. This splash of tea just happened to open her eyes. She immediately began to cry, Mother, why are you still saving me? Let me die. It's already been 4 years and we still haven't found her. My daughter must have met with misfortune. I also don't want to live anymore. When her husband died, she had thought of committing suicide, but at that time she didn't have the courage. She could only rely on her hatred for Yuxiang, for the bandits, for the unfairness of fate, and even for the matriarch in Yupinian to survive. But in the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. That rootless hatred had more or less dissipated. Her heart became more and more empty. When she looked back, she discovered that her children and the matriarch had already been pushed far away. They could no longer approach her. Just as she was feeling completely disheartened, the news that Yu Xiang wasn't the descendant of the Marquis household came. She still had a daughter who was wandering outside, waiting for her to save her. Like a ghost walking in the endless darkness, she finally saw a ray of light leading her to heaven. She threw herself at it without any regard for her life. But she walked and waited for another 4 years. She was already exhausted and couldn't hold on any longer. Even though she knew that her death would stir up rumors in the manor, even though she knew that her unsightly death would cause her family to discover clues and bring trouble to her family, she didn't care about any of it. She just wanted to quickly go down to accompany her husband and daughter. She didn't want to be burdened by living in this world. The matriarch was so angry that her breathing became uneven. She clutched her chest and coughed violently. If she had a whip in her hand, she wouldn't have been as polite as Xiang'er. She would have already lashed the Lin clan's face. Wan Qiu fed her a bottle of honeydew and repeatedly patted her back. Only then did she regain her strength. She said word by word, "I didn't save you. If I could, I wouldn't be able to choke you to death with my own hands." Seeing the Lin clan's heartbroken expression, she continued, "You don't have to seek death. Let me tell you, your daughter has been found. If you're willing to live peacefully, I'll take her back to the manor another day." Could it be that the family you really owed this mother and daughter in her previous life, so she came to collect her debt in this life? If she didn't cause chaos in the family, they wouldn't be able to live peacefully, right? She couldn't think about it. Once she thought about it, her heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys would hurt everywhere. The matriarch rubbed her chest, her expression extremely ugly. The Lin clan stared at her in shock and anxiously asked, "My daughter has been found? Where is she? Quickly take me to see her. Hurry up." She screamed hysterically, struggling to get off the bed as she screamed. The matriarch hit her back with her walking stick and angrily said, "She's been placed outside. You stay here obediently. I'll only take you to see her after she recovers. Otherwise, don't even think about seeing her in this lifetime." The Lin clan became obedient and hurriedly pulled the blanket to cover herself. She cried and laughed as she said, "Mother, don't worry. I'll definitely recover as soon as possible. Is she all right?" "She's very well. None of those who met her were well. Didn't you see how Shen Yuanqi was almost at the end of his life as a slave when he was with her? Once he left her, his slave status was removed and he became the top scholar." The matriarch sneered in her heart, but her face revealed some displeasure. She continued, "I also have to warn you. Even if she comes back, Xiang'er is still the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household. If you want the scandal of your daughter living in the Shang family to be known by everyone, then you can only mistreat Xiang'er so that outsiders can see clearly." "I won't. Daughter-in-law understands the severity of this matter. Mother, please don't worry." Now that the backbone of the family had been found, the Lin clan had also recovered some of their sanity. When they spoke, their expressions seemed to vaguely resemble their shrewd and capable self. The matriarch stared at her for a moment, then hurriedly left without waiting for the doctor to treat her. The group of people gradually disappeared into the distance. "You see, you came out from behind the rockery where she was hiding," a malicious smile on her lips. "After waiting for so many years, the real phoenix has finally returned. The pheasant should be about to drop the parasol tree soon, right? The author has something to say. You guys really sent me away a lot." The broken bowl clanked loudly. "Love you guys to death, Mwax." Tianya Siku threw a landmine, throwing time Mother Gua through a landmine, throwing time temporary silence through a landmine, throwing time chatter through a landmine, throwing time Airshun through a landmine, throwing time Li Yi through a landmine, throwing time Mother Gua through a hand grenade, throwing time hidden fragrance attack through a landmine, throwing time I love furry through a landmine, throwing time a bunch of lotus through a landmine, throwing time Luo Qingtian through a hand grenade, throwing time Yonglu Dui Yen through a landmine, throwing time Yundo Zi through a hand grenade, throwing time Suanyo through a landmine, throwing time Xiao Linzi 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 through a landmine, throwing time Chowga Shi Yen through a landmine throwing time. Chapter 45. Yu Pinyin first entered the palace and informed the emperor that Shan Miaoqi had been a servant in the Zhao family for 4 years. He then expressed that he needed to take care of the Zhao family and cover up this scandal. The emperor was not interested in his family matters and was very pleased with his honesty. After sighing for a while, he waved his hand and transferred Zhao and Shun to the wealthiest Yangzhou. Not long after, many people would die in Yangzhou and Yangzhou's officialdom would be empty. This Zhao and Shun was upright and outspoken, impartial and selfless. He was a useful person. Yu Pinyin obtained the emperor's permission and went to the Zhao family. Zhao and Shun always had the reputation of Zhao Qingtian in Yunzhou. After hearing his intentions, he took the initiative to say that he would help the Marquis household keep it a secret and would not easily destroy a child's future. As for the matter of transferring to Yangzhou, he immediately refused and was very angry about it, feeling that his character was insulted. Yu Pinyin had a good impression of Zhao and Shun's family, and knew that Shun Miaoqi had never suffered any grievances in his family. Although Shun Miaoqi's luck was a bit worse, but the people she met were all sincere towards her. First, it was the family Shen who was obedient, and then the Zhao family who saved her life. That Miss Zhao never treated her as a servant and instead called her a sister. She treated her the same as her own and treated her like a deputy Mississippi. Shen Miaoqi knew that her identity was not ordinary, so she was not willing to sign a death contract with the Zhao family, but signed a living contract every year. It was reasonable to say that this kind of servant would not be valued by the master. But Father Shen was very indulgent towards her, and was even willing to take her along when he was doing business. Thus she knew how to observe people's expressions and win over people's hearts at a young age. That Miss Zhao was coaxed by her within a few days and treated her as a close friend. After hearing about her background, she personally came to the front hall and promised that she would never speak of Kai Chi's, Shun Miaoqi's, secret, or else she would be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Yu Pinyin was very satisfied with the tactfulness of the Zhao family, and Shun Miaoqi did not sign a death contract, so she was not registered as a servant and did not need to go to the household registration department. As for Zhao Anshuan's promotion, he did not mention it again. Once the imperial edict was issued, Zhao Anshuan would not be able to refuse it even if he wanted to. She only hoped that he would not be blinded by the vanity of the Tu Huai, and that he would properly guard this peaceful and prosperous age for the emperor and the crown prince. The matriarch learned from her grandson that the Zhao family had been properly arranged. She also saw that the marks on the Lin clan's necks had disappeared. These past few days she had been clamoring to see her daughter. After thinking it over, she felt that it would be good to let them see each other first, so that they wouldn't be restless and create more trouble. The members of the Lin clan changed out of the plain clothes that they had worn for 14 years and put on a gold-threaded, butterfly-patterned dress. They tidied themselves up and went to meet their daughter in high spirits. As soon as they stepped out of the fu, someone immediately reported the news to Yu Xiang. "Oh, you look so happy. Are you sure?" Yu Xiang was building a pot of fiery red roses. "I'm sure. She doesn't even wear plain clothes anymore. She's wearing a red, gold-inlaid dress. She's even saying things like, 'I miss my daughter so much.'" A very unremarkable-looking servant girl solemnly swore. Yu Xiang carelessly cut off a beautifully blooming rose. Holding the stem, she waved her hand and said, "It's fine. You can leave." She knew what she should know, and she also knew what she should not know. As a result, she did not place people around the Lin clan. She only bribed a few low-level servant girls to guard against the Lin clan's mischief. However, after today, she was afraid that she would have to add a few more nails. This prefecture Yu was about to change. Lulu stuffed 2 taels of silver into the servant girl's hands and ordered her to quietly leave through the corner gate. When she came back, she asked curiously, "Miss Madam hasn't smiled or left the house in 14 years. What do you think is wrong with her today? Could it be that hanging herself has enlightened her brain?" "It's not that she's enlightened, but that she has a backbone. Once a person has a backbone, their mental state will naturally change." Yu Xiang plucked the rose petals one by one into the bowl. Although she had a smile on her face, her eyes were very cold. Lulu quietly sized up her expression and did not dare to ask again. In the blink of an eye, 4 years had passed. Yu Xiang had a premonition that the main character was about to return. Her initial indifferent attitude was now replaced by apprehension. She did not covet anything from the family Yu. She only wanted to stay by Yu Pinyan's side. She was originally a ghost. If it wasn't for Yu Pinyan, she would not be at ease to take root in this strange world. If the main character returned and she left, it would be the same as digging out her roots while she was still alive. Sooner or later, she would slowly wither and die. She was not weak, but she liked to live by Yu Pinyan's side. She felt at ease and happy. At that time, she magnanimously said that she would return to her own place. But when it came to it, she found that if anyone dared to snatch her older brother, she would fight with them. Although the family Shun were her blood relatives, they had never raised her. Why should she willingly leave with them when they came? Did she have any feelings for them? She used a small hammer to smash the petals and poured the bright red flower juice into a mixture of beeswax, lard, and spices. She then stuck a finger on it and smeared it evenly on her lips in front of the bronze mirror. Her fierce red lips quietly blossomed into a sweet but gloomy smile. Other than her older brother, the main character could have anything she wanted. In this lifetime, her older brother could only belong to her. As for the family Shen, they could go back to where they came from. Although she did not care for the Marquis household's power and unparalleled wealth, she cared for her older brother. As long as she could be together with her older brother, even if the future was dangerous, even if the fate was unpredictable, even if the birds were to die and the bough was to be confiscated, she would still be willing. Hearing that Shun Miaoqi was temporarily staying at Shuiyu Nunnery, the old madam sent a confidant mama to teach her various etiquette. At this time the sky was drizzling with fine raindrops and the air was very humid. After inhaling, it brought a sticky and suffocating feeling. Shun Miaoqi had already knelt for the 47th time, and still did not kneel properly. She still had to do it for the 48th time. Her knees, thighs and fibula were all in great pain, and she wanted to find a soft couch to lie down immediately. Shun Miaoqi's face did not have any complaints and only obediently apologized to the mama, and did it again. The mama was very satisfied with her, and there was a trace of happiness on her stern face. She thought that she was indeed the daughter of the first wife of the Marquis household. Her arrogance and elegance had long been integrated into her blood. Compared to Miss Xiang she was not worse, just lacking a bit of dignity. But for a young lady from a noble family, what was the use of having a dignified bearing? This was already enough. Shun Miaoqi followed the rules and slowly knelt down. This time her posture was indeed perfect. Hearing the mama's praise, her tense face relaxed slightly and she sat down to rest. She was not afraid of hardship or tiredness. Even if it was 10 times or 100 times harder, she could endure it. She was only afraid that family Yu would throw her into the nunnery and not care about her. Now that family Yu had sent a mama to teach her the rules, she was at ease. This meant that family Yu did not have any intention of abandoning her. From a young age, she had heard Shen Fu and Shen Mu constantly mention that she was a noble person. She originally thought that they were talking about her future fate, and thus had an unusual yearning for glory and wealth. But it was not until that day that she knew that she was originally a noble person. It was the family Yu who stole her noble status and instead sent her own daughter to live a life of luxury. All her unwillingness turned into hatred, and she did not hesitate to leave that home and head to the capital. 14 years of suffering was not worth mentioning. If it was possible, she would do all she could to erase all the stains from her past. Fortunately, Shen Fu had already passed away, and Shen Mu would not be able to last for more than a few days. Shen Yuanqi was still staying in Lingnan as a servant. The pressure on her body was instantly reduced by more than half, leaving only Zhao family and that lowly spawn in the Marquis family. She needed to personally deal with that lowly spawn, but Zhao family was a bit difficult to deal with. But an arm could not wring a thigh. With family Yu's power, dealing with the Zhao family without any foundation should not be a problem, right? Thinking of this, she looked at the old mama and asked, "Qin mama, what does my older brother do?" Mama Qin took out a few plasters and applied them on Ji Yunshu's leg. She lowered her voice and said, "Your older brother is the commander-in-chief. The entire Han dynasty only listens to His Majesty's orders. Not to mention the first and second rank officials, even the supreme princes and dukes have to bow down when they see him. It's this. Shen Miaoqi's heart was beating wildly. She completely did not think that Yu Pinyin had such a high position. Even though the family Shen was wealthy, but compared to the aristocratic families it was much worse. This caused Shen Miaoqi's vision to be narrow and her knowledge was not high. She did not understand what the commander did but grasped the most important information. She was now one of the top noble ladies in the Han dynasty. She finally obtained the high and mighty life that she had always dreamed of. Even though there were many haze and flaws in this life, it did not matter. She believed that with her own methods, she would be able to get rid of them one by one. Taking out the handkerchief from her collar, she used an extremely elegant posture to cover the sneer on her lips. Just at this time, a nun outside the door said, "Benefactor Shun, someone came to see you. Please move to the main hall." Qin Mama was very happy when she heard this and smiled. "Young miss, quickly change your clothes. It must be the old lady and foreign who came to see you." Shen Miaoqi was at a loss for a moment and quickly tidied up her hair. She then took out the most appropriate dress from the chest and hurriedly changed into it. Miaoqi greets Zumu greets mother. Just as she entered the hall, she gracefully bowed and displayed the elegant bearing that she had learned from Qin Mama to the extreme. 14 years old was the most tender age, and in addition she looked like the Lin clan. Even though her appearance was not peerless, it was as gentle as water. Her eyebrows were faint and she looked very clean. The Lin clan's eyes lit up and rushed over to pull her into their embrace and started crying. "My pitiful daughter. Mother finally saw you. You left for 14 years. Mother missed you so much that her liver and intestines were broken and she almost could not live. Mother, daughter also missed you." Shen Miaoqi plunged into the arms of this luxuriously dressed woman without any trace of restraint or awkwardness. It was as if the 14 years of separation was just an illusion. The old lady thanked the nun who led the way and sat down on the seat of honor. She used a dark and unfathomable gaze to size up the crying mother and daughter. This mother and daughter, no matter if it was their appearance or mannerisms, they were all 80 to 90% similar. If an outsider were to see them, they would definitely praise them as a weak willow in the wind, delicate and pitiful. However, in the old lady's eyes, it became annoying. One crying face in the family was already enough. Now there was another one. Perhaps when she was young, she admired this kind of woman and felt that gentle and graceful were more moving. Otherwise, she would not have chosen the Lin clan for her son. However, as the years went by and the world changed, she gradually felt that a woman like Xiang who was as passionate as fire was more likable. When she was with her, no matter how difficult it was, she would not feel tired. Unlike these two, it was obviously a happy occasion, but why did it look like their parents had died? Thinking of this, the old lady hurriedly spat and secretly complained to Buddha about her misspoken words. In fact, the old lady could not be blamed for being too biased. Anyone who was tortured by a crying face for 14 years would have their nerves become quite fragile. The author has something to say. "Thank you to my little cute creatures, and also thank all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi." Chapter 46. After enduring for half an hour, seeing that the mother and daughter were crying nonstop, the old lady finally spoke. "All right, today is a joyous day. What are you crying for? Quickly sit down and wipe your face. Let us grandparent and grandchild have a good chat." Shen Miaoqi then wiped her tears and helped the Lin clan to sit down. She then knelt on the praying mat and kowtowed to the two elders to serve tea, doing all the etiquette perfectly. The old lady was satisfied with this and her stern face softened slightly. She took a sip of tea and waved her hand. "Don't kneel, get up. Have you been well these past few days? Has the injury on your hand healed? How is your learning of the rules?" Replying to grandmother, Qin Momo has taken very good care of granddaughter. Granddaughter has been living very well recently, eating well and sleeping sweetly. It is just that she misses you very much. The injury on my hand has already healed and only a few scars are left. I think it will slowly fade in the future. Speaking to this point, she folded her hands and tried to cover up the scars left behind by the punishment. Qin Momo smiled and continued, replying to the old lady, young miss learns very quickly. It has only been 6 days and this servant has nothing more to teach. The old lady nodded slightly, but the Lin clan jumped up and held their daughter's hands and asked, how did you get injured? Who did it? Tell mother. Mother will let your older brother help you seek justice. Wasn't this caused by Yu Pinyin? Moreover, Shen Miaoqi really did not want to mention that prison sentence. She secretly glanced at the old lady and shook her head with red eyes. Mother, do not worry. This injury was caused by daughter's carelessness. No one bullied daughter. Really? Really? The mother and daughter hugged each other and cried bitterly, causing the old lady to frown. Not only did she not feel gratified that Shen Miaoqi helped her grandson to cover it up, but it also evoked the taboo of fate that was buried deep in her heart, and her mood became gloomy. Also, who did she learn this bad habit of crying after a few sentences? In the end, she was the daughter of the Lin clan, and it was inevitable that there would be some similarities. After seeing so many candid and bright Yu Xiang, the old lady really could not appreciate such a sentimental girl. Moreover, she was old and could not stand the noise. She really wanted to leave the mother and daughter alone. After enduring for a moment, she opened her mouth to interrupt the two. Miaoqi, how have you been these 14 years? Did the family Shen treat you? Even though there were detailed records in the file, she still wanted to hear her granddaughter's explanation. Finally came. Shen Miaoqi used the interval between wiping her tears to recite the speech that she had already prepared in her heart. That day, Yu Pinyin did not say a single word of nonsense to her, nor did he ask her how she had been for the past 14 years. She was indeed relieved, but at the same time she felt rather dissatisfied. She heaved a sigh of relief because she knew that even if the Shen family had wronged her in the first place, her behavior was also very reprehensible. She could not tell outsiders about it. If Yu Pinyin really asked her about it, she really did not dare to lie in front of him. She was dissatisfied because Yu Pinyin did not care about her at all. She clenched her tear-stained handkerchief and slowly opened her mouth, replying to grandmother, granddaughter has been suffering for these 14 years. At first the Shen family treated me well. But after the disaster 4 years ago, they lost all their wealth and gradually became worse. If I didn't hear Mother Shen talking to her son about my background, I wouldn't have known that my family was still thousands of miles away. I was afraid that they would sell me to a large family as a slave or servant. I had no choice but to steal my childhood swaddling clothes to escape. I rushed all the way to the capital but met with bandits. I narrowly escaped death. Fortunately, I was saved by Zhao Daren's family. That is how we met today. She picked up her handkerchief to wipe her tears. She omitted what she should, concealed what she should, and distorted what she should. She directly molded herself into an orphan girl who had traveled thousands of miles to find her family and suffered hardships. This caused Mrs. Lin to cry bitterly again. She hugged her and scolded the Shen family for being wicked. If not for the fact that Zhao and Shen's family was in the capital, Shen Miaoqi also wanted to arrange the Zhao family so that the marquis household would dispose of the Zhao family. Old Lady Tai Tai looked at her deeply and gently twirled her prayer beads. Mama Ma, who was standing at the side, secretly shook her head. She thought that a Shang clan girl was indeed a Shang clan girl. This nature of seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages was deeply rooted in her bone marrow. Not only did she cheat the family Shen, she also stepped on them a few times and removed herself completely. It was not a bad thing to have scheming methods. However, the bad thing was that this scheming method was not used in the right place. Even the family Shen who raised her could be slandered and abandoned as she wished. Wouldn't she be even colder to the family Yu who did not have any accumulated feelings for her? Even if she brought her back, old Lady Tai Tai would not be able to open her heart to her. Moreover, she had such a fate. She did not know what the dragon scale guard did for a living. Otherwise, she would not put on such a show. Thinking of this, Mama Ma looked at Mistress and saw that she was indeed tired. She lightly waved her hand. All right, the past is already in the past. It is good that she is back. You should speak less about the Lin clan. I am tired and will go to the rear hall to discuss Buddhism with Great Master Fu Hui. You two can stay behind and talk about your personal matters. The Lin clan and Shun Miaoqi could not ask for more and quickly sent her to the door. Because of the 3 family members that she met, only the Lin clan was the closest to her. Shun Miaoqi naturally had to win over the Lin clan first. Moreover, she inquired many times but did not understand the situation of the prefecture Yu from Qin Momo. She only thought that the prefecture Yu was the same as other families, and that the matters of the inner residence were all decided by the matriarch. Therefore, she was more attentive to the Lin clan. The mother and daughter pair snuggled together and talked for a while. Shun Miaoqi probed, "Mother, I was forced to be a servant in the Zhao family for 4 years. If this matter was spread out, would the Marquis family lose face?" "My child, you do not need to worry. Your older brother has already taken care of this matter properly." The Lin clan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and softly said, "That Zhao and Shun can be considered to have taken advantage of the heavens. Your older brother gave him a position in Lianghuai, and the whole family will move to Yangzhou in a few days. They will not be able to return for 4 to 5 years. If he says 1 or 2 unpleasant words, your older brother will definitely make him fall miserably no matter how high he climbs, ending up with a broken family. How would he dare? Then what about 4 to 5 years later? Yangzhou is not far from the capital." Shun Miaoqi pretended to be ignorant and said, in her opinion, it would be best to clean up all the people who knew about this matter or send them far away to Yunzhou, and not allow them to enter the capital for the rest of their lives. Even though she did not understand politics, she knew that Yangzhou was the most prosperous place in the Great Han Dynasty. Wouldn't it be too convenient for Zhao and Shun to be an official there? Especially Zhao Jin. She had tolerated her for 4 years and could not bear to see her rely on herself to gain riches and honor. 4 to 5 years later, transfer to another place. In short, I will not let his family leak out your matter. Fortunately, that Zhao and Shun is an upright person and did not make excessive demands. The Lin clan patted their daughter's back. Shun Miaoqi's heart was filled with dissatisfaction, but she could not say it. No matter how unaccomplished Zhao and Shun was, he was still a 4th-ranked court official. She was a weak female and would not be able to deal with him. However, her relationship with Yu Pinyin was indifferent and she did not have any hope, so she could only endure for the time being. Fortunately, even though the Lin clan had not met her face to face for 14 years, their feelings for her were very deep. This was the most fortunate thing.